Hola, hola, hola. Bueno, parece que va funcionando de momento todo. Sí, estoy escuchando a mí mismo y parece que llega el sonido bien. Estoy viendo que me llega un poquito eco por algún sitio, así que voy a ver por dónde me está llegando. Os iba a preguntar si a alguno os ha llegado ya el enlace donde se va a hacer el directo, porque a mí no me ha llegado. Y nos va a hacer falta. Si no, va a ser complicado que hagamos la watch party. Así que nada, si alguien lo ha recibido, por fin que me avise. Que estoy aquí con la mosca detrás de la oreja. A ver si es que he hecho yo alguna cosa mal, o voy a ver si se me ha bloqueado el mensajillo. Pero bueno, que nada, que vamos a ver qué tal sale el experimentillo cuando... Bueno, sé que uno de los dispositivos que está conectado de momento soy yo, así que si cualquiera me vais dejando, de los que estáis, me vais dejando un mensajillo para saber que me escucháis y que va todo bien, pues mejor que mejor. Voy a probar si este chat funciona. A ver, buenas a todo el mundo. Esto se supone que se debería estar reenviando a todos los canales, porque estamos retransmitiendo por YouTube, por Twitter y por LinkedIn. Lo que pasa es que creo que el LinkedIn, hasta que no se acerca la hora, creo que no empieza el streaming. Pero bueno, mientras me vais dando un poquito de feedback y demás, vamos a ver si podemos ir contando alguna cosilla. A ver. Vamos a ir contando alguna cosilla. ¿Qué le ha pasado aquí a mi cámara? Se ha hecho pequeñita. Déjame que la hago grande. ¡Ay! Listo, arreglado. ¿Alguna cosilla? Nada, supongo que... Se ha hecho pequeñita. Que eso, que es la primera vez que os conectáis a... Nada, supongo que a un live stream, a un watch party conmigo, porque es la primera vez que lo hago. Eso, que es la primera vez. Voy a aprovechar este ratillo, este impasse que tenemos hasta que empiece un live stream, el evento, un watch party conmigo, para hablar de Geo Developers. Voy a aprovechar este ratillo, este impasse que tenemos hasta que empiece. Quienes no nos conozcáis, si buscáis, voy a aprovechar este Google, si no nos habéis encontrado ya en Meetup de Geo Developers, no nos encontraréis que somos un grupillo de personas que nos vamos reuniendo con cierta frecuencia. Ahora estamos en el calendario de este año, he puesto no solo los eventos que organizamos nosotros, sino los eventos que creo que son de interés para frecuencia. Ahora estamos que compartimos el calendario de este año, he puesto no solo los desarrollos que organizamos nosotros. Tenemos nuestras típicas geobirras, que son los viernes que nos montamos para que compartimos el calendario con algo. Tenemos un ratito de networking online. Tenemos nuestras típicas geobirras, que son los viernes. Dentro de unas semanillas tenemos a Nacho Ponsoda hablando de GeoServer. Luego el día de la GeoNight, el evento mundial de una semanilla, se celebra la noche de la geografía. Estaré contando cómo desarrollé el juego Terra Incógnita hace un par de años, de ayuda de la noche de la geografía, por inspiración de la asociación de Terra Incógnita de Española de Geografía. Y bueno, aquí tenéis pues eso, tantos eventos nacionales, por inspiración de nacionales, me refiero en España, Terra Incógnita de Española de Geografía. Y bueno, aquí tenéis pues eso, tantos eventos nacionales, me refiero en España, y me falta una S. Estoy aquí de geografía, título. Y bueno, aquí tenéis. Vale, entonces bueno, la idea es que nos vayamos juntando, que hagamos charlas en las que vayamos compartiendo experiencias, así que cualquier persona que tenga un poquito de inquietud, la idea es que nos vayamos juntando, que ganas de compartir un poco las cosas que ha hecho, pues os animo a que tenga un poquito de inquietud, la idea es y ganas de compartir. Si vais al canal de Twitter, x.com/geo Developers. Pues veréis que hemos puesto hemos fijado un post a través del cual podéis enviar vuestras peticiones para dar una charla o vuestras ideas para compartir una charla. Así que os animo podéis enviar vuestras peticiones, a que nos enviéis cosillas y así para dar una charla o un poco más ideas para compartir una charla, la comunidad, y seguro que hay un montón de gente a la que le interesa lo que estáis haciendo, que enviéis cosillas y así para dar una charla. Nos miramos a nosotros mismos y decimos, ¿a quién le va a interesar esto que comunidad? Y seguro que siempre hay gente que está empezando, gente si es muy avanzada que nos miramos, que está buscando lo que le va a interesar proyectos, siempre hay gente que otras personas están empezando proyectos, si es muy avanzada que animaros, que ya os digo que si no es que se conecten online, luego los vídeos suelen tener todo el tiempo acumulando visitas, a la gente lo encuentra y les sirve. No es que se conecten online. Y por último deciros que tenemos un canal de Discord, pero que ahora mismo lo tengo compartida la ventana de Discord, que es un follo, así que no voy a entrar a enseñarlo. Y por último deciros que tenemos un canal de Discord, pero que ahora mismo lo tengo todo lo demás está en orden. Así que nada, mientras empieza todo lo demás está en orden. Os voy a dejar un vídeo mientras yo voy buscando el enlace al live stream, si os parece, ¿vale? Y me muteo. Que es un vídeo que cuenta un poco cómo va a ser el Developer Summit, y luego en el descansillo voy a enseñar un par de cosillas. Un vídeo que cuenta un poco cómo va a ser el Developer Summit, que creé en su día y que creo que puede ser un par de cosillas para que nunca hayáis estado allí, para que sepáis cómo es aquello. Así que, sin más, otra vez, mi cámara se ha vuelto a poner en pequeñito. Os voy a intentar poner el Dive into Dev. Aquí está. Y me muteo. Y muteo el Spotify también, que creo que no está sonando ahora. Pero por si acaso. Venga.
Hi, everyone. I'm David Cardella. I lead a group of product managers that work on our developer technology.
And I'm Julie Powell, and I'm Principal Product Manager for our Web Development Technologies.
Welcome to Dive into Dev, where we take a sneak peek into the 2024 Developer Summit.
This is our 19th annual Developer Summit. For me personally, it's been 13 years. How about you, Dave?
Julie, I had a feeling you would be asking me that. I'm a little hesitant to tell you because it is going to show my age. However, for me, it's been 18 years.
Yeah, that's a long time.
You're right. Okay, let's get started. This year, we have a week full of activities. We'll kick things off Tuesday morning with a warm welcome from Esri's president and founder, Jack Dangerman. And this plenary will be all about building applications.
We'll focus on the client SDKs available to you to build your solutions. We'll have a lot of demonstrations showing how you can create great experiences in your applications. We'll be demoing how you can leverage ArcGIS scripting language in your work, whether it's in a pop-up or in your visualizations. We'll also cover a new technology that we're introducing, which is web components, part of the JavaScript SDK. And we'll be introducing a brand new native SDK.
I'm excited about that one. And as part of the Day 2 plenary, you'll learn all about extending ArcGIS with the Pro and Enterprise SDKs, automating your system with new productivity tools in Python, and we'll also tap into powerful spatial analysis tools that give your users deep insight into their data.
You also see the work we've been doing with AI and how we're using it to improve the developer experience and also bring more capabilities to you. Now, we can't forget about Day 3, which is our keynote speakers. Now, to tell us more about it is Anita Kemp, a member of our developer experience team. Anita?
Hi, everyone. I'm looking forward to attending this year's Dev Summit. This year, we're excited to welcome 3 amazing keynote speakers. Liz Fulton from Asplin will talk about how their solution optimizes vegetation management using tailored apps for field staff. Justin Maddox from the Victoria Department of Transport and Planning will share how they are empowering their planners with web-based 3D spatial analysis.
Y con vuestro permiso lo voy a ir dejando por aquí para pasar a compartir la otra ventana donde vamos a poder ver el streaming en directo, que ya he conseguido el acceso. Así que dame un segundo que tengo que configurar una nueva ventanita. Captura. Correcto. Livestream. Correcto. Vale. Display capture. Livestream. Correcto. Vale. Estoy retransmitiendo la pantalla que no es. Livestream. Correcto. Esta es la pantalla que tengo que retransmitir. Estoy retransmitiendo la pantalla que no es. Livestream. Correcto. Vale. Esta es la pantalla. Voy a ponerle el sonido también. Livestream. Correcto. Vale. Voy a ponerle el sonido también.
I came back from Dev Summit with a solution pretty much ready to go.
Because of Dev Summit, we've been able to stay ahead.
When I came back from Dev Summit, whether it's the numbers that we're coming up with an analysis or visualizing a map, it is leading ahead.
Everyone. Oh, this is wonderful. We've got a lively crowd, and that is excellent. Everyone. Hello, my name is David Cardella. Oh, this is wonderful. And we've got on behalf of the entire team here, I'd like to welcome you to the 2024 Developer Summit here in the beautiful Palm Springs. Excellent.
Perdón, no sé por qué se está metiendo un eco por aquí. A ver, voy a desconectar otra vez y a ver.
We're going to celebrate you and the work that you do. And so we saw Brittany in that video, and she said, you know, the Dev Summit is great because I can come here and ask all these crazy questions. And so, well, you can ask crazy questions anytime, but I guess this is the time where you could ask these crazy questions in
¿Por qué entra dos veces? Está entrando por mi...
And we're going to see a lot of technology here today. And technology is great.
Voy a dejarlo, creo, en mute hasta que averigüe.
But without you, it's just technology.
Voy a dejarlo donde viene el
The
eco.
work that you do, bringing technology to your users, is what brings meaning to technology. So I wanted to acknowledge all of you and thank you for that. And now what I'd like to do is to invite Jack.
Bueno, de todas formas, por suerte, esta primera parte es donde David hace las presentaciones, le da, bueno, empezamos, invitamos a, ¿no? Se invita a Jack al escenario, que siempre, pues bueno, recalca el papel, ¿no? que jugamos los desarrolladores a la hora de implementar tecnología y el rol tan importante que esto supone. Vamos a ver si... Creo que de momento lo que voy a hacer es bajar el volumen al mínimo. Voy a dejar los subtítulos puestos y con vuestro permiso voy a intentar escuchar, a ver. Que el problema es que yo no escucho siquiera... No escucho ni siquiera el audio. Los problemas del directo. ¿Por qué no me llega este audio? Y si quito este audio de aquí. Los problemas del directo. ¿Por qué no me llega este audio? Bueno, este es el momento de networking, ¿no? En el que Jack, como siempre, invita a que todo el mundo se presente. Bueno, este es el momento de networking. Bueno, que presente, que descubras o conozcas a alguien nuevo, ¿no? En la audiencia y esto nos va a dar unos minutillos más para saber si podemos arreglar el tema del audio. Y esto nos va a dar unos minutillos más para saber si podemos... Hola, Desiderio. Si puedes confirmar, supongo que tú también estás escuchando o has escuchado el eco, ¿verdad? desiderio. Si puedes confirmar, supongo que tú también estás escuchando o has escuchado el eco, ¿verdad? Hola, desiderio. Si puedes confirmar, supongo que tú también estás escuchando o has escuchado el eco, ¿verdad? Y esto, Hola, desiderio. Si puedes confirmar, supongo que tú también estás escuchando o has escuchado el eco, ¿verdad? Y esto, Sí, está entrando una y otra vez el eco. Lo que sale de mi audio vuelve a entrar, sí, por lo que estoy viendo, ¿no? Una y otra vez el eco. Creo que ya he detectado el porqué. Se había quedado un reproductor ahí puesto. Vamos a ver ahora.
You know, the purpose of this meeting is certainly to learn about the technology. And there are people behind the screen here that have been working for days, weeks, months, maybe years, getting ready for this presentation. So for me, this is my favorite day of the year, seeing these presentations. Because they're not just conceptual.
Es cierto que la preparación del Developer Summit muchas veces no se percibe lo que pasa hasta que estás ahí. O sea, os puedo decir que cada minuto que hay ahí de alguien hablando son muchas horas de ensayo y de preparación.
Sudman and I were just talking behind the stage here about explaining is a way of learning itself. Learning how to explain it to you. And this is part of the deal here, is learning and learning and learning. And you particularly in this audience, you didn't get to where you're at by chance.
Bueno, pues eso, ¿no? Que al final el propósito de estar ahí es aprender y aprender, y lo que no sé es por qué a mí el audio no me está saliendo y no estoy escuchando yo directamente. Voy con el retraso del streaming.
That's why we often open up the session by having you meet somebody new. And during the breaks and during the whole session, I want you to share what you're doing so we learn from each other. Because while Esri's one of the reasons why you're here, it's also building new relationships, people that'll be your friends for a long time. And it's that kind of community that actually comes, like the little video suggested, out of this meeting. Another purpose is from time to time.
A little bit.
Yeah, a little bit, not much. But don't overdo it, David. I mean, it's really important, you know.
Bueno.
But let me just close by saying our feeling very much is that you and the work that you do, and also how you do that work, is really important. It's not only important for your organization, but if we see the context of what collectively we are doing, applying geographic science, it's making a better world. And so thank you very much. And I'll look forward to meeting with some of you during the weekend.
Aquí, como siempre, Jack, no sé si habéis visto el último vídeo que hay en mediaspace.r.com con Jane Goodall, pero sí hace mucho énfasis en la importancia que el GIS tiene y en el impacto de las personas y los desarrolladores también, pues obviamente, pues como uno más, ¿no?
It's about learning from one another, sharing ideas, and fostering and building a community. So our hope is that you take the time this week to really immerse yourself in all of the activities and the events that we've got going on this week. This is our 19th annual Developer Summit, and it's all because of you. It's you. That's right, it's 19. It's you who engage us.
19 añitos ya.
It's you who provide feedback so that we can improve our products and the technology.
Y con vuestro permiso creo que voy a ir haciendo pequeñas pausas. Voy a parar el vídeo para que no me atropelle yo con las voces de David por encima. Pero bueno, nada, simplemente voy a intentar parar poco el vídeo para que no nos quedemos muy atrás y voy a ir parando en las presentaciones que crea que sean más reseñables, ¿vale? Y si tenéis cualquier cosa que comentar, cualquier duda, me lo decís y hacemos una pausa.
You are the largest gathering of geospatial developers in the world. There we go. That's right. You should give yourself some applause. There's over 2,500 of you in this room, and there's many more thousands who are looking online. You represent thousands of organizations from many different disciplines. You're global. You're from over 50 countries, and some of you have made a very long trek here to be with us today, and for that, we thank you. Over 35% of you are new to the Developer Summit, so I wish you a very special welcome. We've got hundreds of developers from Esri here this week, and they're eager to interact with you, to learn from you, to get to know you, and to engage with you. So I encourage you to ask those crazy I was talking about in that video. We've got an exciting week planned for you. Of course, it starts today in this room with the first of 2 plenaries. We'll talk about a bit of a developer overview, and then we'll dive really quickly into some of the client APIs that you have available to you to build applications. Tomorrow morning in this room is the second plenary, and we'll talk about extending and automating the entire ArcGIS system. We'll talk about all the spatial analytic tools that you have available to you. So we've got an amazing team backstage ready to show you some of the work that they've been working on. Those of you who have been to the Dev Summit before know that Thursday is keynote day. And we have 3 amazing keynote speakers lined up. Liz Fulton from Asplin is going to talk about how they're using technology in their infrastructure solutions and how they use it to work on some of the vegetation management exercises that they have. Justin Maddox from the Victorian Department of Transport and Planning, they've created some amazing 2D and 3D visualization tools, both on the web and in game engines. And finally, Michael Helander from Airspace Link will talk about how they're using location services in the solutions that they have for drone flight management. I've heard each one of these presentations. They're inspiring, they're engaging. You do not want to miss Thursday. Okay, let's get started. Here's a look at the ArcGIS system through the lens of a developer, and you can see that there are several hooks into the system that you can leverage. You could be extending and customizing our desktop and enterprise software, or building apps on top of our SaaS, or perhaps creating solutions or integrating location into existing business systems through our PaaS developer technology. This content and capability comes to you as a set of services. And these services can reside within your own infrastructure, or we can host and scale and make them available to you. Now, some of you might look at ArcGIS as a set of products. However, I would submit to you that you might look at ArcGIS as a set of capabilities. Capabilities that you can use to get your work done. Capabilities that you can use to solve the challenges that you have. It could be building a field operation solution. It could be analyzing and visualizing real-time data, or perhaps spatial analysis. But regardless of what capability you need, you as a developer have different experiences that you can use. You can use the extending SDKs to customize behavior and build custom capabilities in Pro and Enterprise. For example, in ArcGIS Pro, you can use managed configurations and
Supongo que esta parte, perdona que haga aquí una pausa, esta parte, si habéis estado en previos Developer Summit, ¿no? En alguno de los anteriores, esta parte os suena, ¿no? Al final es un poco el mensaje de la plataforma, de que los desarrolladores son... El concepto de desarrollador es muy amplio, ¿no? Y dependiendo, ¿no?, dónde ponemos la línea en qué diferencia a un desarrollador de otro, ¿no? Y hay personas que crean aplicaciones utilizando herramientas no-code, hay personas que lo que hacen es extienden productos que tenemos en Esri también están dentro de lo que nosotros consideramos la familia de desarrolladores, ¿no? Hay gente que utiliza las SDKs y las APIs. Entonces, bueno, aquí es básicamente decir que es un reto muy grande para nosotros poder cubrir a toda la audiencia que quiere usar tecnología para automatizar o construir aplicaciones. Y como sabéis, bueno, pues hoy nos vamos a centrar en la parte de desarrollo de aplicaciones. Le voy a dar al play a ver cómo sigue.
So you don't have to learn a new language. You're not forced to work in a framework or an environment in which you don't want to. This allows you to build high-quality, enterprise-grade applications and get them to your users quickly. And when you use this tooling, it's brought to you through a comprehensive set of developer resources. You've got guides, tutorials, API reference, samples, other developer tools. So no matter what case...
Con vuestro permiso, aquí lo que voy a hacer es bajarle un poco el volumen para que sigáis viendo las imágenes y si queréis podéis seguir leyendo la transcripción que tengo por debajo, que por cierto está hecha con Google Chrome con la parte de live captioning, así que si no funciona bien del todo, lo siento, pero es lo mejor que he podido conseguir para dar un apoyo más, ¿vale? Y aquí al final David lo que siempre hace al principio de los Developer Summit, ¿no?, es contar el big picture, ¿no? Cómo aproximamos desde Esri a la tecnología, cómo creemos que es la forma más fácil de entenderla a partir de capacidades que se comparten entre diferentes SDKs y demás. Y bueno, y de cómo vamos adaptando las SDKs para cubrir todas las necesidades, ¿no? Es un poco siempre un repaso de qué ha cambiado, qué es hacia dónde va la dirección y desde aquí es donde podéis leer entre líneas un poco, ¿no? Cómo se entiende nuestra tecnología y de ahí parte de la justificación de cómo va el roadmap. Venga, seguimos.
We're leveraging modern day browsers. And with the latest generation of the native SDKs, they've been architected to leverage a C++ core, giving you the best performance on mobile, desktop, and embedded devices.
Y esto, como sabéis, ¿no?, al final está hablando de la parte nativa, ¿no?, de las SDKs, que tenemos un núcleo hecho en C++ que nos permiten tener todas las SDKs evolucionando prácticamente al mismo ritmo, porque la funcionalidad está escrita por un solo equipo y luego lo que se hacen es se crean APIs desde la parte de Java, de la parte de Unity, desde la parte de todas las demás SDKs nativas, pues se conectan a ese core de C++, ¿no?
To work with the API and on the platform that you want. But we continue to evolve. This is driven by you and your requirements, and it's also to leverage the latest technology in order to deliver those requirements to you.
Y esto que está diciendo para mí es una cosa muy importante. Desde el equipo de Developer Experience estamos intentando llevar cada día más a la práctica y que se note más. Y es que sois vosotros, son los usuarios que usan la tecnología, los que muchas veces nos inspiran a saber en qué dirección ir. Es verdad que hay veces que los propios equipos internos que crean productos tienen necesidades también, ¿no? La gente que crea ArcGIS Pro, la gente que crea el Map Viewer y diferentes tecnologías, ¿no?, del ecosistema van solicitando requisitos para los desarrolladores, pero lo que ponéis en ArcGIS Ideas también se mira con bastante detalle. Y lo que estoy intentando es trabajar con los Product Managers para que en cada release, igual que hace el equipo de ArcGIS Pro, se comparta a partir de qué ideas o de qué peticiones que han llegado a través de Community se han implementado nuevas funcionalidades para que sepáis y veáis que efectivamente se escucha la comunidad también. Así que nada, con eso os animo. Y aquí ya podéis ver un poco que lo que está hablando David es la capacidad de cómo se entiende ArcGIS para poder trabajar con una tecnología que acepte datos de cualquier tipo y haga cualquier tipo de análisis o de trabajo y de una manera, pues, con rendimiento, ¿no?, y eficiente, que desde luego es algo que seguimos peleando para mejorar cada día.
There's also cross-platform tooling, where you can write your business logic and then compile it to the platform and the device that you need to support. Now, as developers, we have choices. And some of you have already chose to use open source libraries. And that's great.
Y este mensaje supongo que también lo habréis escuchado porque llevamos ya pues desde 2021 insistiendo, repitiendo para la gente que se lo haya perdido, ¿no? Pero que yo creo que eso fue uno de los grandes cambios. De hecho, fue el cambio que pasó justo antes de yo entrar en Esri Estados Unidos, ¿no? Que se relajó el licenciamiento, se hizo un esfuerzo para documentar la integración con tecnologías open source con nuestros servicios HTTP, nuestros servicios REST, ¿no? Y a partir de ese momento, de 2021, se hizo públicamente, se documentó y se hizo público que se iba a seguir el compromiso por parte de Esri a que toda la parte nuestra de backend pues sea cada vez un poco más interoperable y podáis consumir, aquellos que especialmente hayáis hecho una inversión en tecnología open source, ya podáis seguir consumiendo los servicios y bueno, y quien quiera usarla pues que también lo pueda hacer, aunque no lo haya hecho todavía.
Visualization capabilities, also the ability to take your data, host it, and create a service from it.
Y esto es simplemente un repaso a lo que llamamos Location Services, que yo no sé si todo el mundo lo tenéis claro o no, pero voy a hacer simplemente Location Services. Cuando hablamos de Location Services, hablamos en Esri de las APIs que tenemos alojadas en la nube, que servimos nosotros, que mantenemos nosotros y que ponemos a disposición de los desarrolladores, ¿vale? Si os fijáis, ahí están agrupados como en grandes bloques. Y cuando hablamos de Location Services, básicamente hablamos de eso.
We recently released 2 new services. The first one is the Places service. It has over 50 million POIs from around the world, and it's constantly getting updated with high quality, rich information.
Esto supongo que ya lo habréis escuchado alguna vez, pero bueno, esta es una de las últimas APIs que hemos diseñado conforme a estándares, con OpenAPI, con la especificación OpenAPI. Y bueno, pues que permite pues buscar datos de lugares más allá de lo que teníamos antes, que básicamente teníamos la dirección, pues ahora tenemos mucha más información. Ahora tenemos la capacidad de coger horas de apertura y demás. Y este es otro servicio mejorado, renovado, que básicamente es el servicio de mapas que hemos tenido toda la vida, pero que se sacó la versión 2, también OpenAPI Spec, y que añade nuevas capacidades, como se está enseñando ahí, ¿no? La capacidad de cambiar el idioma, la capacidad incluso de cambiar las fronteras en disputa, que en algunos casos muy concretos pues son requisitos que exigen unas organizaciones a otras, y eran peticiones que nos habían llegado por parte de diferentes organizaciones, y se han añadido nuevos estilos también, como el estilo de outdoor y demás, se han añadido al mapa. ¿Vale? Y una cosa que salió hace no mucho es que también a partir de en noviembre se puede encargar en un mapa base, le podéis activar por defecto para que aparezcan los puntos de interés.
Now, we've received a lot of feedback about our vector tiles.
Esto es nuevo.
Feedback has been that you enjoy the flexibility of the pre-styled base maps. You like the language options. You definitely enjoy the frequent updates. Some of you have asked for all of this capability to be delivered as static map tiles, specifically PNGs. I'm pleased to say that the static base map tile service offers just that. It's designed to provide you on-demand generation of static map tiles, and they're created from our vector base maps. These tiles are created dynamically and rendered on the server. And one of the best parts is that this means that they're always up to date. So when would you use this service? Well, you could use this service when creating lightweight applications in which you won't have a vector tile rendering engine. Or perhaps you're building applications targeting older devices that might have memory or processing limitations. Or maybe your solution already has a complex drawing stack, and you don't want to add yet another drawing stack or rendering engine on top of that. This service brings the power of vector tiles to static map tiles.
Bueno,
Next is the elevation service. It's
espero que se haya
brand new.
entendido, pero bueno,
It's very
básicamente
focused, and
este
allows
es
you to retrieve
una...
elevation
déjame que
values
siga este y luego hago
anywhere
la
in the
pausa.
world. You simply pass in a location, an XY value, and you get a Z value representing elevation. This service allows those of you who might typically work in 2D get that third dimension and that 3D perspective. And you can use it to generate elevation profiles, map terrain, as well as use it in route planning. So if you need to consider the third dimension, this is a great service for you. Now to take us through a demonstration of the static base map tile service and the elevation service, I'd like to hand it over to Anita.
Thanks, David. I, along with many leaflet developers, love using map tiles. They're simple, they're easy to use, and Leaflet has supported them from the very beginning. So I decided to create this app using Leaflet and the static base map tiles service. I'm going to open up the network tab so that we can see these tiles delivered as PNGs fetched from the service. As I zoom into Paris and pan around the map, we can see that the performance of the new service is great. Currently, I'm using the OSM standard style, but there are a variety of ArcGIS and OSM styles that I can choose from, such as ArcGIS Light Gray, ArcGIS Streets, and ArcGIS.
Si os fijáis, como creo que esta parte más o menos la podéis seguir con la imagen, básicamente aquí Anita, compañera del equipo de Developer Experience, nos está enseñando, ¿no?, cómo el servicio de teselas estáticas lo que nos permite es cargar, bueno, en este caso con Leaflet, pero podría ser obviamente con cualquier librería de mapas, un mapa de manera muy rápida. Tenemos la ventaja de que es más ligero para el cliente, para el navegador y para el dispositivo pintar esto, por lo tanto es un poquito más rápido que la tesela vectorial. Tiene el inconveniente, pues que ya sabemos de que al pegar, ¿no?, al ser un PNG, pues no se puede customizar el estilo, no se puede girar de la misma manera, pero hay casos de uso donde, bueno, pues hay muchos clientes que echaban de menos tener esta posibilidad que antiguamente teníamos implementada de otra manera, pero ahora se puede hacer directamente al vuelo, ¿no? Ahora no cocinamos o generamos todas las teselas y se quedan ahí estáticas hasta la próxima actualización, sino que podemos, cada vez que cambien los datos que hay por detrás, pues los podemos mantener actualizados y regenerar esas teselas. ¿Vale?
Which loads some GeoJSON data that I have of a trail segment in the Santa Monica Mountains. I can interact with the app by clicking anywhere on the map, creating a point, and then calling the service to return the elevation value for that location. In this case, 401 meters. Now, as I've been talking, the service returned the Z values for points all along my trail, such as 497 meters and 614 meters, so that I could generate an elevation profile and visualize the change in elevation, both based on the mean sea level, which I get by default, and based on an ellipsoid, which I got by setting the relative to parameter in the service URL with ellipsoid before calling the service and handling the results. So that was a look at the two new services.
Si os fijáis, la API de elevación es una API que básicamente, aunque lo que se ha hecho ha sido crear una API muy fácil de usar para resolver, porque esos datos lo hemos tenido siempre, ¿no? Pero la API que había antes era muy compleja anteriormente de usar. Entonces se ha creado una API para utilizar todos esos datos de alta calidad que tenemos y poder ver un poco, ¿no?, cómo podemos acceder a la elevación de un sitio, y no solo en función a la altura relativa del mar, sino pasándole también un geoide.
A set of services. And these are services that you can bring very easily into your application. WebGIS includes web maps and web scenes. And these components contain all aspects of the web GIS information model, including layers, pop-ups, the symbology, the styling, any arcade scripts that you have in there. So web maps and web scenes contain both content, but also capabilities, allowing you to do GIS on the web. Maps and scenes are actually powerful development tools for each and every one of you. They are the central component to our APIs, and when you use them, you'll write less code. So instead of creating a map in code where you get all the layers, you figure out the rendering.
Aquí es verdad que siempre tenemos, ¿no?, el mensaje de recordar la potencia que tienen los webmaps, aunque yo sinceramente como desarrollador hay veces que el hecho de que me pongan, ¿no?, el énfasis en que tengo que escribir menos código para que el webmap o el web scene lo que me permita escribir menos código, la verdad es que no es algo que me atraiga en exceso, no sé, quizás por el entorno en el que he estado. Pero sí que es verdad que es uno de los puntos fuertes, pero yo creo que la portabilidad es una de las cosas y la colaboración con agentes externos al equipo de desarrollo me parecen unos valores también a recordar siempre. Así que nada, simplemente lo quería comentar.
Our web technology continues to evolve. Our JavaScript SDK leverages latest browser technology by using WebGL, which gives us access to the graphics card and the GPU. And this allows you to build applications with stunning visual.
Vamos a empezar la parte de la API de JavaScript y aquí empieza... Me quedaré un ratito callado porque aquí empezarán una demo detrás de otra muy chulas. Cualquier cosa, repito, cualquier cosa que queráis que comente y demás, decídmelo por el chat, ¿vale?
Users insight into their data where they can see patterns that they really perhaps couldn't see before. And web components. This is new to the JavaScript SDK, and these are a set of building blocks that you can use to kickstart your application. We'll look at web components in more detail in a moment.
Bueno, y los web components son relativamente nuevos. Como ya sabéis, salieron en la versión anterior, hace unos meses. Pero bueno, sí que es verdad que hace un par de semanas sacaron una nueva versión que contarán cositas nuevas hoy.
Both via their attributes as well as spatially. This allows you to build applications that have analysis on the client, and also this reduces the back and forth to the server, allowing you to build very performant applications. So by leveraging this modern technology, you can build apps that provide an experience to your users to allow them to do GIS in their applications. Well, to show us the power of GIS, probably best done with a demonstration, and for that, I'd like to hand it over to Jeremy.
All right. Thanks, Dave.
Para quien no lo sepa, Jeremy es el CTO de toda la parte web y la API JavaScript.
Your web GIS, you can do data exploration and geospatial research completely on the web. To illustrate this, I'm going to walk through an example of water usage and water resources in the state of Kansas. Let's get started. We have over 300,000 water wells here in the state, and we can filter this data down to explore some of the interesting patterns. Well, let's look at something like estimated yield. This is estimated yield in gallons per minute. And I can visually explore this data just interactively, moving my slider around and seeing how that data moves on the map. But let's set it something like 10 gallons per minute. That's how much water you would need to power a household. Or 200 gallons per minute. That's how much water would be required for an irrigated crop out in western Kansas. Some of these wells produce a lot of water, upwards of 1,000 gallons per minute. Let's set it to 10 and then explore this map in a different way with smart mapping tools. I could do a heat map, which would show me the density of those locations. And this is kind of what you'd expect. Around cities, you'll see a lot of wells. That's probably because they're meant for households. But if I focus that heat map and use that estimated yield, I can see where we have high producing water wells and a high density. Now, if we explore that with another layer like rivers, I can see that some of this makes sense, right? Along major rivers, you're going to have a lot of water available. But out here in western Kansas, it's very dry. There's not a lot of hydrography, not a lot of rivers. It doesn't get a lot of rainfall. But we see how we have some very high-performing wells out here. And that's because this is part of the High Plains Aquifer. The High Plains Aquifer stretches through North America, central North America, and provides a lot of aquifer resources. You might have heard of aquifers like the Ogallala. Well, that would be part of the High Plains Aquifer. And if we were to drill in and look at some data around the High Plains Aquifer, I can see things like this depth to bedrock. This is how far you have to drill down in that well to reach the bottom of that High Plains Aquifer. We can use tools like aggregation to summarize this data. This does, by default, the count, but I can go in here and use that depth to bedrock value and produce the average value. Now when I come out of here, I can go into the style, change from count to that bedrock mean depth, and now we've got a view, an aggregated view of how much potential water there could be there. Now water doesn't exist from the base all the way to the surface. It gets used, it gets recharged, it comes and goes, it changes. So in 2020, the actual water thickness, so how much water is actually available in feet within that well, you can kind of see how it's distributed through the state. Some wells, some areas have over 300 feet of water left, but other areas of the state are almost close to zero. The state of Kansas monitors the water usage in this area. So if I look on one of these wells, like this Montezuma Northwest, and I go back 50 years ago, I had to go 62 feet from that well to reach water. In 2024, I have to go all the way down to 220 feet. That's a huge difference over that 50-year time period. And so we can...
Con vuestro permiso voy a hacer una pausa aquí. Me gustaría escuchar un poco cuáles son vuestras opiniones con respecto a esta demo. Porque la verdad es que me ha cogido un poco por sorpresa. Yo no sé qué demos van a enseñar hoy. Estoy viéndolas por primera vez como vosotros. Y creo que aquí Jeremy está haciendo mucho hincapié o demostrando, sin código necesariamente, pero está enseñando cómo la API de JavaScript es capaz de hacer o servir para casos de uso de exploración de datos, ¿no? Y nos está contando una historia de cómo diferentes funcionalidades que está enseñando charts dentro de los pop-ups, está enseñando cómo ingentes cantidades de puntos se manejan muy rápidamente y de manera muy ágil, ¿no? en el cliente, para de trasfondo contar esa historia de que esto, que a fin de cuentas el Map Viewer está construido con la API de JavaScript, ¿no? Pues son cosas que vosotros, ¿no? podéis crear para los clientes finales. Entonces, pues nada, simplemente perdonad, os dejo seguir con la demo y si os parece me comentáis cómo lo veis. Si captáis algo distinto.
I can create other charts, like this one, which still groups by groundwater management district, but then gives me a box plot for each decade, from 74 all the way to 2024. That's the power of this work. Doesn't just stop here. This is saved in this web map, and this web map can then be used in other apps, low code, no code, or within your own custom applications. And you're going to see more of this as this morning goes on. So, thank you, and back to you, Dave.
Bueno, ya está ahí eso. Va a terminar diciendo que después de hacer esa exploración lo guarda en el web map, ¿no? Y ya se puede consumir por un desarrollador sin más esfuerzo.
I mentioned before that web components are new to the JavaScript SDK, and they encapsulate both functionality and styling in a standards-based way. You could look at web components as a set of building blocks that you can use to assemble your solutions and applications. Because they're standards-based, there's a lot of value that comes with that. They're native to the browser, so you don't need to worry about compatibility challenges. They're easily integrated into frameworks and tooling like React, Angular, Vue, and many others. And they simplify your development experience by having you write less code. And finally, web components promote reuse across applications. So these are components that not only encapsulate functionality that you can reuse, but also the experience, the UI, the look and feel of it. Well, again, probably the best way to see web components is in action, and for that, I'd like to hand it over to Omar.
Thanks,
Que
Dave.
empieza lo bueno, creo yo.
When you visit the developer documentation site today, you'll find a new section dedicated to web components in the JavaScript Maps SDK. The updated documentation describes how the SDK was extended to include a new component library, how to get started in your preferred development environment, and programming patterns for working with web components. Unlike regular HTML elements, such as anchor tags and paragraph tags, web components are custom elements that allow our developers to extend regular HTML and encapsulate complex logic into them, providing an extensive library of reusable code across Esri. And web components are compatible across modern browsers. Some of our custom elements have already been bundled into different component packages, such as the map components package. Let's compare the process of creating a web map application with the core JavaScript API to the more streamlined approach offered by the map components package. In the core JavaScript API code, a view div container element is written into the body. A web map and map view are initialized. And any additional elements, like the search, legend, are added to the view using JavaScript. On the other hand, web components allow us to reduce boilerplates and instead focus on using HTML markup to accomplish most or possibly even all of our tasks. And web components don't only shine in vanilla JavaScript, but also in your favorite framework. As you'd expect in a framework like React, Angular, or in this case, Vue, setting properties and adding event listeners is done directly on the component. And don't let the encapsulated logic fool you. You can still access the core JavaScript API's powerful capabilities. For example, in the onReady function, you can access the web map for any additional work after the view is ready. Looking back at the core JavaScript API code, you're mostly writing the same boilerplate that you saw in the vanilla JavaScript application. Earlier today, Jeremy shared with me his web map that he authored in MapViewer about Kansas water data. I can take this web map and use it to develop an application in any development environment I'm accustomed to. To do so, I can go to the Get Started page in the SDK documentation, and I'm going to look for the React page. And in this page, there's a template that acts as a convenient starting point for development. With that link, I'm taken to a sample repository where I can download the entire directory as a zip file. Once the file's been unzipped, I can install my dependencies and run the development server. The templates come with a predefined web map that's added to the item ID of the map element. I can replace that map element with the one provided by Jeremy, save my changes, go back to my application, see how that looks. And as you'd expect, you have your web map, a legend component on the bottom left, and then you have a search component on the top right. But I'm more interested in some sort of layered switching experience. So to see which components are available as part of the map components package, I can go back to the SDK documentation site, open up the component API page, and here I'm taken to a page that has the component reference for all the currently available component packages. Going under the map components component reference, I see there is a layer list component, which is exactly what I'm looking for. The component reference has a description for the component's properties, methods, and events. But under the demo, I'm going to go look for the code. So I'll click Show Code. Under this, I can find the HTML tag name of the component I'd like to use. But because I'm working in React, I'll have to use Pascal casing. Now, going back to our application code, I can replace ArcGIS Search with ArcGIS Layer List, save my changes, go back. And just like that, my work is already done thanks to the simplicity of web components. Back to you, Dave.
¿Qué os parece? Creo que bastante potente, ¿no? El tema de integración con los frameworks parece bastante sencillo, ¿no? Y el poder tener la posibilidad de acceder a toda la potencia de React por detrás aún más. Perdón, de la API de JavaScript. Creo que Julie dará una charla online en Madrid JS próximamente, si no el mes que viene, así que estad atento, ¿vale? Dejo que sigamos escuchando. Me alegro, Francisco Javier, que te mole.
A little bit, and we're going to talk about product and technology vision. And to take us through that, it's my pleasure to introduce Sud Menon, the Director of Software Product Development. Sud?
Thanks, Dave. Good morning. It's great to hear.
Para quien no conozcáis a Sad es el jefe responsable de desarrollo de toda la tecnología de Enterprise, las SDKs de desarrollo, o sea, prácticamente todos los equipos prácticamente no todos los equipos de producto, incluso los que desarrollan ArcGIS Pro, terminan reportando la parte de desarrollo, los responsables técnicos reportan a Sad. Así que él nos va a dar una visión de ArcGIS en su conjunto.
Applications, user types, content, and capabilities. And all of these work seamlessly together to give you the score GIS system on top of which you can build industry-specific business systems like some of the examples of which you see here. New at this time is the ArcGIS Well-Architected Framework, which is a website which gathers together all of the patterns, practices, architectural guidelines that are relevant to building these industry-specific business systems using the SCORE GIS system and all of its architectural patterns. I'd like to talk about some of our key guiding principles in building ArcGIS. I'm just going to walk through them. The first is that ArcGIS delivers powerful geospatial capabilities that work synergistically together. ArcGIS includes apps and experiences that bring geographic data to life. ArcGIS supports identity, user types that give you access to applications and core functionalities, and user-defined roles based on these types that you specialize depending on your workflows and your industry and the privileges that you need to associate with particular roles. ArcGIS includes a powerful sharing model that enables both private as well as public sharing. ArcGIS is open to developers with rich APIs and SDKs that allow access to all of its aspects. And I think you just saw some amazing demonstrations of that. And of course, ArcGIS runs in the cloud as well as in your own data centers and on your desktops and devices. And ArcGIS is powerful enterprise IT that is powerful, performant, scalable, resilient, and secure. So these are our guiding principles in building ArcGIS, and we continue to evolve it with these in mind. Here is another slide, a representation of that same ArcGIS system. On the left.
Una pregunta, ¿estáis pudiendo ver el streaming desde LinkedIn? Porque yo lo estoy intentando y no lo consigo.
As well as in the cloud as SaaS. In the center, you see all of the capabilities across all of the different types of data, all mapping and visualization, analysis of different kinds of data, as well as data management and transaction management against data. It's these powerful capabilities that work together and that help you build the systems of record, the systems of insight, and the system of engagement that really GIS can help you create. And it's to do with all of these being available together that really empowers that. On the right, you see all of the applications that come with ArcGIS. This is what lets you take your data, and become productive with it right away. And then, of course, you have the content and data. Your data combined with the data from Esri, the ArcGIS Living Atlas, gathered from the community as a whole, authoritative data that you can use to build your systems. One of the key visions of ArcGIS has been that ArcGIS allows you to easily create and share rich applications and experiences that are fueled by your data and Esri-provided content. Creators, professionals, developers, you can use these GIS tools as well as the APIs and SDKs that come with ArcGIS to easily create these applications and experiences using both no-code and code-based experiences. Here's a slide that visually shows you how that works within ArcGIS. When you've created that web map in the map viewer and you want to create an app, you have a choice of creating instant apps, in an example here with Atlas and the chart viewer, or building your own experience using Experience Builder. You can create story maps. A slide shows you, a new capability within story maps, the ability to create these briefings-based presentations, as well as, of course, dashboards. ArcGIS works with all types of geographic data. That's one of its central visions. This includes tabular data, as well as textual data that a lot of business uses, as well as all of the most specialized geographic data types that you see here. ArcGIS works with both discrete objects and entities and relationships. That's the world of features and networks and topologies, as well as with graph data, entities and relationships, the new knowledge graph capability that we've introduced recently.
Estoy confirmando de que efectivamente parece que en LinkedIn, por alguna razón, no sé, los que escribimos podemos escribir, pero no recibimos ningún mensaje. Bueno, aquí podéis ver que Sade está poniendo mucho hincapié, ¿no? Ahora en la parte de la capacidad y el cariño que se le pone a ArcGIS como sistema, como entre todas las piezas, ¿no? Para poder trabajar con datos de todo tipo geográfico, ¿vale? Yo creo que esa es lo que más importante nos podemos quedar con esta parte de SAT. Perdón.
Dashboards have mobile and 3D views. In the area of location services, we have the new places service, as well as 3D Esri-based maps. Hub, in addition to having initiatives, now has discussions and projects. Survey 123 allows you to collect information using computer vision. Field Maps supports indoor data collection. Parcel fabrics support parcel lineage, as well as taking the fabric offline. Utility Networks continues to make progress in all areas, and now you can use the Maps SDK to take data offline and perform offline tracing. In the area of analysis, in Spatial Analyst, you have solar radiation modeling and space-time kernel density. Spatial stats includes presence-only prediction, as well as causal inference analysis. There's the all-new raster function editor that was just introduced into the new map viewer in ArcGIS Online. Geo AI introduces the latest model architectures, and there's more pre-trained models for you to use in your work. Trajectories are a new type of scientific data, and radar, which is now part of the world of imagery and raster, continues to advance steadily. Raster analytics in ArcGIS Enterprise and Kubernetes allows you to perform highly distributed analytics with performance and scale. And you're going to see some of that.
Esta parte a mí siempre me cuesta un poco más seguirla porque yo creo que esta parte es muy enfocada al desarrollador muy GIS, ¿no? Y aquí básicamente Sam nos va haciendo un resumen de muchas de las tecnologías que yo creo que nadie tocará tantas, o muy poquitas personas, ¿no? sabrán bien lo que son los Parsing Fabrics o trabajarán al día a día con el Utility Network y demás. Pero bueno, aquí básicamente es un pequeño resumen a esas novedades que dejan entrever, creo yo, la complejidad del sistema y la cantidad de líneas en las que se avanzan simultáneamente, que muchas veces por eso yo creo que nos falta velocidad por la amplitud de cosas que se abarcan.
Server, a new capabilities server in ArcGIS Enterprise supports video. We also introduced reality mapping, and as part of that, you have the ArcGIS Reality Extension for Pro. You also have ArcGIS Reality Studio as a standalone application. And that capability continues to grow with the ability to do reality mapping against satellite imagery, which was recently introduced. There's also support for oriented imagery, and one of the workflows that supports is inspection mapping. And then in the area of 3D, CAD and BIM, and the ability to ingest data from IFC and the ability to interoperate with civil 3D surfaces were recently introduced. I3S is one of our core ways of storing scene data, and it supports these scene layers, and 3D object layers continue to advance. You're going to see some of that. They allow transactions, there's the feature view, and then there's also the integrated tile view that supports really fast visualization. And as part of that, we also introduced support for 3D tiles across all of our clients. And then the map.
Esta creo que es la parte chula, ¿no? Que siempre hemos estado, en los últimos años hemos estado trabajando mucho en la especificación del I3S que creamos nosotros y propusimos y se adoptó como community standard, pero también, como ya habéis visto en la parte de la API de JavaScript, pues se ha metido ya el soporte a las 3D tiles, ¿no? A las teselas 3D que adoptó la OGC también, que fue creado por Cision y que, pues amplía la interoperabilidad del sistema, que yo creo que ahora, pudiendo consumir cosas como los datos que están publicando Google Maps a partir de sus teselas 3D y demás, yo creo que va a ser un cambio de paradigma.
I'm now going to talk through, some of the visions that guide us on some of our core capabilities. I'm not going to be able to cover all of them, but I'll just start with mapping. So mapping is a term that connotes so many different things, right? One is just placing something on the map, the act of, now I can see it, I can see where it is. And in that area, ArcGIS allows you to collect and map information on assets, entities, and relationships. That's foundational, and that guides so much of our work with respect to field data collection, as well as cartography, because now that you know where it is, you still need to depict it in the right way for what it is. But it's not just about locating things in space, it's also about exploring and understanding the spatial and temporal patterns and distributions of data using data-driven smart mapping. And again, that example with, the groundwater depth that you just saw, this is just a really good illustration of that. It's very powerful, and it is one of our central goals and visions to keep advancing that. And finally, ArcGIS allows you to communicate and share information clearly in amazing ways. That vision guides our work on, so many things, including layouts, dashboards, story maps, and all of the ways in which you can present information using ArcGIS.
Me gustaría saber si vosotros también filosofáis tanto sobre qué significa el mapeo web.
Some of the different ways in which that can be done, the techniques that are available, and some of what's new. Moving on to analysis, our vision there is that ArcGIS supports integrated spatial analysis and data science across all types of geographic data. What that leads to is, the vision of a comprehensive collection of tools and functions that can be driven via desktop and web user experiences. Also, comprehensive model builders that allow visual chaining and composition of these tools and functions, comprehensive Python libraries and notebook integrations that cover all of these tools and functions, and also tight integration with R. This is
De esto supongo que nos van, bueno, supongo, no estoy seguro que va a enseñar más por lo que he visto, pero el paquete de R viene pegando fuerte, los nuevos wrappers.
And data science area. On the right, you have data science. There's spatial statistics as well as Geo AI. Spatial statistics is, drawn from statistical modeling and analysis. Geo AI brings deep learning and machine learning, which is shared in common between both spatial statistics and Geo AI. In the area of geoprocessing and spatial analysis, there is support for tool sets across all of the different data types that ArcGIS supports. Here's a slide that helps you visualize that, showing the work in spatial statistics, big data analytics, raster analytics.
Yo, si os soy sincero, la parte de analítica siempre ha sido mi asignatura pendiente. Hay tanto que se puede hacer y sé que la gran potencia está en la parte de Enterprise y de ArcGIS Pro que a la parte a la que yo accedo, que son las API REST, ¿no? Con los servicios, sé que es un mínimo porcentaje, pero bueno. Igual, me gustaría saber cuántos de los desarrolladores trabajáis con estas tecnologías y si desde Geo Developer queréis que hagamos más énfasis en este tipo de herramientas y de casos de uso.
Of data, one of its core visions is also to include, integrate, and deliver AI in that context. We think about AI as Geo AI, which is all about using AI to extract information from sensor data and to perform analysis on data. That's a big branch of AI, and there's a lot of value there for its use within GIS. The other area is AI assistance, and this is all about ease of use, and natural language interfaces are a key part of that. If we look at Geo AI, one of the key goals there is to make it really easy for you to apply AI-based techniques to geospatial data. Make that very accessible, bring all of those models and capabilities to bear, both for information extraction from text, information extraction from imagery, video, point clouds, sensor data, as well as for analysis of feature and tabular data, of time series data, of gridded data in areas like classification, prediction, forecasting.
Para los que no lo sepáis, en Medium hay un blog que se llama Geo AI que tiene un montón de cosas chulas.
Train models for a variety of use cases, and you can fine-tune these models. This slide shows you some of that in terms of capabilities related to information extraction as well as analytics. And you're going to hear more about this in tomorrow's plenary.
Hola, Frank.
Next, turn to our work on AI assistance. And the vision there is that ArcGIS integrates AI to assist you in doing your work. So there's a whole range of things here, but just starting with enabling easier access to geographic information. But it's also about making our products easier to use via natural language interfaces. And when I say our products, I mean all of our GIS products like Pro and the Map Viewer and dashboards, all of it. So this work, in doing it, these are the things that we keep in mind. It's really about doing it effectively for an assistant to be of value. You, the users, who use that assistant need to really see that value. And we're very cognizant of that. So it's really, that's why all of these adjectives are italicized here, right? Like we want the assistants to be useful. Now, building these assistants, what are these assistants doing under the hood? They're understanding the user's written or spoken intent, and then they are creating the appropriate results that the user can then further refine as needed. And the assistant is a combination of using AI and LLMs to understand what the user said, and then to actually drive ArcGIS, because ArcGIS has all of these APIs, has all of these JSON representations of things like styles. We can leverage the AI to actually understand what the user said and then generate the appropriate action or representation that can be then used to drive the software. But of course, to do all of that, one needs instructive examples, robust prompt engineering and fine-tuning, as well as strong user validation and testing as we build out these assistants. I wanted to show you one more slide here, and this is showing that our work.
Tengo muchas ganas de comentar un par de cosas sobre esto, pero voy a dejar que acabe.
It's in multiple areas. One is we think of assistants for citizens and non-experts who are working with GIS as a whole. Right? This might be somebody working with Hub, ArcGIS Hub, for example, or somebody walking up to a GIS portal and wanting to understand answers to their questions, wanting access to geographic information. The second is users, both beginners as well as experts who are using our GIS products like I described with Pro and the Map Viewer and Business Analyst, and making it easier for them to use those products, improving their productivity. With respect to the first area that we talked about, this year we've been sharing some examples of our work in areas like the Hub, and some of you may have seen videos about that. What we wanted to do at this conference was share some of the work that we've been doing on the right, and to do that, we have Christian here from the Map Viewer team, and Christian's going to talk to us about our work in mapping. Go ahead. Thank you.
Bueno. Esto huele a demo con inteligencia artificial generativa. A ver.
Let's take a look at an example of how you can use natural language to style your data using the help of a mapping assistant. Now, I found this layer in the Living Atlas that contains housing unit variables from the American Community Survey. And as I look at the item details page, I can see that this is a well-documented layer with a lot of metadata. Let's switch over to the Data tab and look at our Fields view. When I look at my fields, I can see that each of these fields has very descriptive field aliases and well-written field descriptions. And as I browse my data, I can see that I have access to the number of housing units that were built in each area for various decades, going all the way back to 1939 or earlier. Now, let's go ahead and load this layer into an app that contains a mapping assistant. And I'm going to go ahead and ask this assistant a question to style my data. So I'm going to ask it to create a map that shows the percentage of homes built before 1939. And in a matter of seconds, I get a result. And what's going on here? The assistant takes a look at that field metadata, and it tries to find, based off of all of those aliases and descriptions, the field that I want based off what I asked it to do. And as we can see in the legend, this did a pretty good job of identifying the field that I wanted. And not only that, it picked a style, a choropleth map, that is suitable for this data. Not only does the assistant help me identify the data I want, but I can also specify specific mapping parameters, such as color ramps. So I'm going to ask it to create the same map, but this time using a color ramp, and it does exactly what I want. Now, something I want to emphasize here is that while the assistant is helping me get started with styling my data, I still maintain full control over that styling. So I'm going to open the Smart Mapping panel and make some adjustments that suit my needs. Now, let's go ahead and ask it one more question here. I'm going to ask it to create a dot density map that shows the decade in which homes were built between 1939 and 2010. And again, in a matter of seconds, it gave me exactly what I wanted. And the remarkable thing here is that I didn't have to list any of these fields out or its aliases. I gave it a date range, and it knew which fields to find, and then it created the style with a very nice color ramp. So now I can see a pattern that I could not see before.
Ahora que tiene un curro por detrás,
this works really well with a well-documented data set. But I know that most of us in this room work with data that looks something like this. Not a lot of documentation, right?
Eso es lo que estaba pensando.
Almost no metadata.
Alegremente.
And if we go over to our fields, very cryptic field names.
Correcto.
No aliases, no field descriptions. However, in our testing and research, we found that the assistant still does a remarkable job, even with data like this. So I've brought this tree data into my application. Let's try a few styles. Create a heat map. Now I can see the density of my points. How about we categorize each tree based off its common name? It found a species field, and then I can see the density based off different tree species, and it shows a unique value style that helps me see that pattern. All right? Let's ask it to color each tree based off the carbon storage value. Now what happened here is really amazing. There isn't a field named carbon storage in my data. I knew it was there, but it didn't have that name, but it selected one called C storage. It inferred that that's probably what I wanted, and it put a continuous color ramp to that data and gave me a map that allows me to
Está claro que todo esto está probado y ensayado y sale a la primera, pero parece muy interesante.
Show the relationship between carbon storage and ozone removed. Again, in about 1 second, I get a bivariate choropleth map or a relationship style that uses that same C storage field and this O3 removed field. The underlying model knows that the chemical formula for ozone is O3. And so when it saw that field name, it knew that's what I wanted. And it created this otherwise very complicated style very easily for me. And not only that, I can update existing styles with the help of an assistant, not just create new ones. So I'm going to ask it to update the size of each point based off of the leaf area. And it identified this leaf area field here and changed the sizes dynamically based off of that data. Now, something I want to point out here is the assistant isn't going to always give me exactly what I want. For example, this is not the final way I would style my data. I would still go to the smart mapping panel and adjust the size in a way.
Esto está bien para el analista GIS que sabe cómo usar, o el data scientist que sabe trabajar con estos datos.
And that's probably something that I would like to present back to my user. These are just a few examples of how you can use generative AI with a simple natural language interface to style your data. Thank you.
Thanks, Christian.
La verdad es que me parece bastante curiosa. Me gustaría, repito, me gustaría escuchar lo que opináis los demás, que de hecho de eso va un poco la Watch Party. Y vamos a ver si se va a contar algo más de inteligencia artificial antes de comentar.
In this area of AI assistance, it's a work in progress. This is an early prototype, and we will be sharing it with you as it develops for feedback and improvement. Now, there's a lot that I did not cover, including things like 3D and digital twins and utility network and business analyst. There's no time to go through all of our visions in those areas. But I wanted to show this slide because at one level, this is the overall guiding vision for us in building GIS, which is that GIS enables the geographic approach, and then in supporting all of these capabilities like data collection and visualization and analysis, it's itself, in the context of enabling decision-making and action, and that is our overarching vision. I'd like to talk briefly about the ArcGIS well-architected framework that I referred to. It's available to you at architecture.arcgis.com, and you will hear more about it in tomorrow's plenary, and it gives you all of the information that you need.
Esto es nuevo para mí también.
With respect to patterns, practices in building these industry-focused systems. And on our developer technology, you're going to hear a lot more about that. I just wanted to reiterate what David said in his talk, which is that these are the foundational products of ArcGIS across PaaS, SaaS, and software, and that each one of them is developer-enabled and comes with developer technology.
Esto lo vais a ir viendo cada vez más y más representado en todas las páginas de Esri. Va a ser los 4 productos principales para desarrolladores: Pro, Enterprise, Online y Platform.
And many of you who are building applications that need those location services and a consumption-based model are leveraging it. On the left, you have GIS. Many of you work for organizations that use GIS. Others of you are partners working with the GIS community, and there's rich opportunity to extend GIS and build on top of GIS using our developer technology. And that developer platform consists of the client APIs and SDKs. It consists of the SDKs for extending our system, for extending Pro and Enterprise.
Bueno, yo creo que esta parte es un poco reiterar lo que ya ha comentado antes David, ¿no? Que hay aproximaciones para todos, y hoy vamos a seguir profundizando sobre todo en la parte de Enterprise. Pero bueno, vamos a ver qué nos cuentan la API de JavaScript de nuevo.
Oh, that was great. Okay, the ArcGIS Maps SDK for JavaScript enables you to build powerful and high-performance web applications. From extremely fast performance, working directly in the browser, to 3D applications, to client-side analysis on not just vector data, but also raster data, or working with data temporally. To data-driven visualization, like Sud said, this is a huge area of focus for us. We're always trying to make that easier and more powerful. To what Omar showed you earlier, the 50-plus mapping web components that you can bring into your application with very little code. This is leveraging web standards and modern browser technology. Okay, it also includes the Calcite design system. This Calcite allows you to build accessible, consistent, and easy-to-use experiences with your own custom colors and theming to responsive design. All of the components are now fully responsive. To integration with frameworks, just like how Omar showed. And then for the designers in your group, they can design the application.
¿Cuántos estáis usando Calcite?
Allowing you to build accessible, user-friendly, and consistent apps with less effort. Now, charts. Charts have been part of that web map information model for a couple of years now, but they've only been accessible in Esri's applications. But it's part of that WebGIS information model, and it's powered by feature layers. And so now we're excited to release those components to you so that you can bring those charts into your applications. And you can make it completely customizable.
Creo que esto sí es un punto fuerte de una de las nuevas novedades, que desde CDAR no habíamos visto nada parecido con gráficos.
I'm going to turn it over to Kitty and Jimmy. Kitty?
Thanks, Jeremy. Earlier this morning, Omar introduced us to web components and mapping components using our Kansas water usage and aquifer data. Now that we've added the mapping components to our app, we can continue to build an interface using Calcite design system. Calcite is a web component library that includes UI elements, which include buttons, panels, accordions, alerts, and many other components to create a cohesive experience with minimal effort. And Calcite is built with accessibility in mind, so your apps can reach diverse audiences. In addition, Calcite has created resources so you can continue to build accessibility into your apps, such as setting the language so more users can access your app's contents. To create our layout, we'll refer to navigation, which provides a consistent location and structure for your users to navigate your app. So we can create a navigation, and then we can slot in a second navigation using our navigation secondary slot. From there, we can add in the action bar, which is comprised of actions typically used for the core operations of our app, where when a user interacts with an action, we can display a panel, which also encompasses our mapping component. Slotted into our navigation secondary slot. We have our action bar, where we've changed its layout to be horizontal, and then we have our two actions, one for our legend and another for our bookmarks. From there, we can add in a panel, which includes our two mapping components, our legend and our bookmarks. By default, we'll set our bookmarks to be hidden. So in our app, we have our navigation, our second navigation, and then our action bar with our two actions, our legend and our bookmarks. With our legend active, we can explore our map to determine which district is associated with which color on our map. We can also toggle over to our bookmarks and then zoom to a district to explore our data further. We can also load in content directly from our portal web map item, where our title is being read in our navigation's heading, and we can load in an informational window which includes our description and access information directly from the portal item.
Os animo a los que estáis en YouTube que reaccionéis con los iconitos que hay en el chat.
To show the effects of subsidence on the land over time, in addition to loading in our map's description and credit information for our users. By default, Calcite also provides styling and branding so your app can have a cohesive and beautiful experience. But with just a few lines of code, we can alter the look and feel of our app to fit the needs of our brand. We can also build a responsive design with our app, ranging from large-scale desktops to tablets and even mobile devices. Next, Jimmy will introduce charting components and how we can continue to customize our app. Jimmy?
Bueno, aquí hemos visto un poquito de Calcite, normal y corriente, si no lo habéis visto nunca antes, que supongo que muchos sí. Vamos a ver, que nos presenta Jimmy.
Omar has demonstrated on how to get started with map components and showed you all the necessary documentation to do so. Charts documentation lives under the same directory. Simply navigate to the welcome page and you can get started here. Let's see how we can further customize our custom application to include some charts. The goal is to bring the two box plots that Jeremy had configured in Mapier earlier into this custom application. We'll get started by looking at our HTML file. Here you can simply add the ArcGIS charts box plot elements inside the Calcite component. This will act as a placeholder for loading the charts in just 1 second. Switching over to the JavaScript, for context, I've set up an event listener on the map component for when the view is ready. Now I can grab the map and the view object directly from the event target, and this will allow us to get the layers that we will use to load in the charts. All the charts configuration are directly stored on the layer object, so you can simply refer to them by setting the correct index numbers. We can grab those two box plot elements that we're creating in the HTML file. And the last thing we need to do is set the configuration and the layer to that element. In just a few lines of code, you have successfully brought in two box plot that was configured in Mapier in your own custom application. Charts components also offer some interaction features that can further enhance your experience with both the chart and the map. Let's see how we can make a selection on the chart and have the same features get selected and highlighted on the map as well. Within our JavaScript, I'll start out by setting an event listener on the box plot element for when a selection is complete. With the view object we obtained earlier from the map component, we can highlight selected features on the map based on the box plot selection. Now if we select a box, all the feature that box represents will get highlighted and selected on the map as well. Let's see how we can take this one step further by configuring a brand new chart directly in your code editor. The goal is to visualize the depth of water in 1974 versus 2024. We want to symbolize them proportionally by saturated thickness. We can create a scatter plot with our helper package, charts model. With charts model, you can do all the configuration directly in your code editor with minimum amount of effort. Let's start off in the index.html. Just like before, we can add the ArcGIS chart scatter plot element inside the Calcite component as the placeholder. Now, within the JavaScript, we'll start off by defining all the necessary parameters for a scatter plot. In this case, we need the layer, the x-axis, and the y-axis field. Now, with those given parameters, we can generate a scatter plot model. With charts model, you can do all the configuration here in your text editor. You can set the title, update the x and y-axis titles, show the linear trend line, hide the legend. And we can also set the dot size proportionally based on the saturated thickness of the water. Now with that, we can retrieve the JSON configuration from the scatterplot model. And just like before, let's grab the scatterplot element from the HTML. And the last thing we need to do is set the configuration and the layer to that scatterplot element. With just around 15 lines of code, you have successfully created a chart that is color matched to the feature layer that help you visualize your data in a brand new way. Now I'll pass it back to Jeremy.
Pues sí, yo creo que tienen un montón de potencia estas integraciones. Hay que acostumbrarse y no creo que sea trivial, pero bueno, el código al final veis lo simple que queda.
The Maps SDK integrates deeply with the maps and charts that are part of your web maps. It also showed how the Maps SDK has embraced web components, making web development even easier. I don't know if you noticed, but Omar showed working with vanilla JavaScript, Vue, and React, while Kitty and Jimmy showed working with the Vite framework. This web component first style of development makes it easier than...
Colossus, totalmente de acuerdo. Ahora comentamos en la pausa.
WebGIS is not just about the maps that can be used in your apps, but also those individual layers. Those are the building blocks. Developers can pull directly from their WebGIS layers and bring them into their application with a very simple API like you see on the right. Layers come stylized with the pop-ups, the effects, the blending. They can even be nested as group layers, and you can now save group layers. And we have many different layer types that are supported, and we'll show oriented imagery in just a second. But this is super powerful, right? It's not just the map that I have to take the map and bring it into my app. I can work with these individual layers and define how they look and how they behave. Like this example here of a group layer that's pulling in two tiled imagery layers. One is the current information, so showing that flow style.
Si habéis perdido la parte del group layer es muy interesante. Echarle un ojo.
And then we're using within that group layer image blending techniques to take that color and push it onto those flow lines. A few years ago, this was done by Ann Fitz and the Developer Summit Plenary, and it was all with code. Now you can do this all with the UI and just bring it into your apps. Web editing is a huge focus for us, including the ability to work with complex data models like the utility network. From a powerful editor that works with smart forms and client-side rules, to integrated snapping in both 2D and 3D environments, to working with related records that are part of that form, and now to be able to work with version data with a component right out of the box. So, to show us about how oriented imagery layer, editing, and the utility network advancements, I'd like to turn it over to Julie and Jose. Julie?
Thanks, Jeremy.
Esta es otra de mis cosas que me mola un montón, que creo que hay que afinar un poco más, pero vaya, qué chulo queda. Si no habéis visto Oriented Imagery.
Image to locations on the map. Here I have the new oriented imagery layer in Map Viewer, and what we're looking at is a coverage view of where I have my imagery. I'm going to zoom in, and we can see the individual locations where these photos were taken. I'm going to open the new oriented imagery viewer, and as I click on the map, it's going to pull up the best available image for that location. Now what it's showing us is the area on the map that the current view covers. So as I move the image, you can see that updating on the map. Now this is a 360-degree image, but what's amazing is you can even integrate photos from your mobile device. Because what we're doing is we're using the metadata captured with the image, processing it, and then connecting those pixels to location. I can also explore other images available for that same location. Perhaps I want to look at it from a different perspective. Now there's many uses for oriented imagery. You might even be thinking of some ideas for your own work. I'm going to show you one example here. So this is an app built with the JavaScript SDK, and allows me to explore the city, and if I find any issues, I can report it and get it resolved. So here I see some graffiti on the house. And what I can do is locate in the image a point and then find the corresponding location on the map. I'm going to use this reference point to create a work order in that exact location. So I'm going to start the editing workflow. And you see that I have the date pre-filled using Arcade. I'm going to set the request type to graffiti. It's a brand new work order. And there's another field here that's been pre-filled. This is the unique ID for the building. Now behind the scenes, there's a relationship defined between the buildings feature layer and the work order feature layer. And what I'm doing is relating it so that the building with graffiti is related to the work order. Let's have a look at the code for how this was pre-calculated. Now using Arcade, we're doing a buffer around the clicked location, and then I'm intersecting it with the buildings layer. And then if we get a building, I return the global ID. And now we have those two wired up as related records. Now this is all possible because the JavaScript SDK now supports editing of related records. This application is a little bit of a custom editing workflow because I've integrated orient imagery. Let's look at a little bit of simpler example. In this app, I can just explore the work orders, review them, update their status. And so I'm going to click on this building. And we see there's one work order submitted. I can add an additional one, or go in and update one that's already there. Perhaps I'll update the status. Now, the code for this application is unbelievably simple. If we have a look at it, I'm using map components. I'm loading the map, and this is loading a web map. So I have all the layers defined, and I have the form defined in the web map. Then the editor component is picking up the form configuration and then automatically generating the UI based on that config. And then I'm using Calcite for the layout. Now the code is incredibly simple because the whole experience of editing related records is just part of the editor component. It's part of the SDK. This is just one update we've done in the last year for editing, and there's so much more. For example, now you can work with very complex data models. So to have a look at an example of that, I'd like to hand over to Jose.
Thanks, Julie. The SDK delivers a variety of sophisticated and user-friendly components that facilitate basic to more advanced workflows with a default component experience. I'll now walk us through an editing workflow with a more complex data model. Here we have a water distribution utility network, and today I'm a planner for the city's district. The district has mapped out a service division within this area and is planning on extending its services. The task is to add a new service connection to one of the properties in Buttonwood Circle. Before I make any edits, I will use a new version management component to switch to a version I created earlier. I will now use the editor component to add a residential service line. I currently have snapping enabled, and as I attempt to place the service line along the distribution line, I don't see any snapping indicators. This is expected as the SDK respects the utility network rules that dictate which features can be snapped to. This behavior is designed to ensure data integrity. And currently, currently there are no rules that say you can snap a service line to a distribution line directly. So instead, I'll place a tap at the end of the distribution line. We will now see a snapping indicator as I place the tap at the end of the distribution line, and I'll finish creating the feature. Let's go back and try to add that residential service line again. We will now see the snapping indicator as we're snapping to the tap and not the distribution line directly. So I'll start drawing the service line, and I'll use the editing constraints to set the distance of the line to about 17 meters, nothing more, nothing less. So I'll finish creating the service line, and we will see the dirty areas get added to the map. The dirty areas flag the most recent edits to the network. I'll now finish the service connection by placing a service meter at the end of the service line. And once I finish creating the feature, I'll quickly validate our network topology to ensure we have the most up-to-date network. I will use one of the new map components, the utility network validate topology, to perform our validation. We will see the dirty areas get removed from the map as we successfully validated our network topology. I will now use the utility network trace component to run an upstream trace on the service connection to ensure it's connected to the rest of the network. I'll place the starting point on the service meter, and I will run the trace. As we can see, we've successfully connected the service connection to the rest of the network, and our task for today is complete. The editing workflow we just completed is one of the numerous use cases supported with the default component experience, and the goal for the team is to continue to add more complex data models and editing workflows onto the web. Thank you. Now back to you, Jeremy.
La verdad es que automágicamente la API de JavaScript hace mogollón de cosas.
That was awesome. Great job. The Maps SDK fully embraces the WebGIS capabilities, from the new oriented imagery layer type to allowing you to edit and manage data, whether you're working with simple features or complex data models. You can also build 3D web applications with the Maps SDK for JavaScript, from high-quality visuals to integration of 3D models to shadow visualization running completely on the GPU, to working with large multi-dimensional data sets like voxel layers and be able to slice and explore that data interactively, to providing realistic scenes and weather. This allows you to build amazing 3D applications. And to give us an example of one of those apps, I'm going to turn it over to Sasha and Stefan. Sasha?
Thanks, Jeremy. Let's take a deep dive into the new 3D upload capability. A new sample allows you to upload 3D models. Various formats like IFC, Collada, OBJ, and other industry standards are supported to get uploaded and converted for web use. This sample shows how you can create your custom workflow. But now let's check what you can do and create a demo application. This demo application got inspired by many cities which share their requirements with us, such as City of Prague. With this application, an architect is able to upload a model and let it review by the city console. So first, let us upload a model. Second, to find the initial position for the model, let's search by address. And this gets converted by the ArcGIS geocoding service to coordinates, so that we now set the new building within our realistic context of Prague. We can create our project site. For that, we use the same editing tools like in 2D. So we can snap on the parcel corners.
La verdad es que el Snappy es una de mis favoritas, las capacidades favoritas.
Can get enabled on the sketch view model. With the latest release, we also got introduced editing constraints, which can get enabled with setting the tooltips. With that, I'm able to tab in, set 90 degrees angle and 100-meter distance to get the exact site as intended by the architect. So let's save the project site, and as you can see, the polygon is used to flatten the integrated mesh to get room for the new building. Now let's place the building. For that, we can also use the snapping options and snap on the project site. Now we can save with apply edits on the scene layer like any other editing workflow. So now we have the geometry mesh ready on the client side. To show how a city could use that to create their own checks, I would like to hand over to Stefan.
Thank you, Sasha.
Máquina, Stefan.
Besides visualizing and uploading 3D models, the scene layer now also allows to access the model. We can query the layer through the REST API for original geometry data. Using the JavaScript SDK, I can query the 3D mesh geometry of the building or its 2D footprint returned as a polygon. This allows us to create a tool which allows architects to check their work before submitting a final building application to the city. One of the regulation layers defines the allowed height for new buildings. One of our buildings violates it, indicating that changes would have to be made to the project or that negotiations have to be taken with the city for a height variance. Using client-side queries, I can evaluate our building in relation to the surrounding infrastructure, such as this gas pipeline. Using the geometry engine, I can highlight the part of the gas pipeline which intersects with our site. Similarly, we can evaluate the impact of a nearby flood zone on our building. These are just some examples of what you can build with the JavaScript SDK when having access to scene layer geometry. Custom web apps like these bring the power of geography to new audiences and help us solve the challenges we face. For our final review, we switch back to a realistic visualization. We now have a new way to present our scene. For developers with graphics expertise, we offer a new API called Custom Render Nodes. It allows you to build your own visualization and effects. Here we see one of the new samples showing you how to create a camera depth of field for a tilt shift effect. This API replaces the external renderers API and gives you access to more 3D information such as normals and depth. In our application, we are going to use a custom render node to highlight our project with cinematic effects. We start with the camera depth of field to bring the project into focus, mask out the building site, boost the saturation, and finally add a spotlight shining on our scene. And with that, back to Jeremy.
La verdad es que como API de JavaScript es una burrada las cosas que se pueden hacer en 3D. No sé cuánto estáis trabajando a tope con JavaScript, pero una pasada.
Incredible visual. Thank you. Okay, so this morning we saw a lot of things. We saw doing GIS directly in the browser, saving a web map. Then Omar took that web map and used the new mapping components to build an app out of it. And then Kitty used Calcite to bring that application to life and making it responsive. And then Jimmy brought in charts. Then we saw Julie work with oriented imagery layer and novel editing workflows. To Jose working with the utility network to edit complex data models. To the amazing 3D visuals that Sasha and Stefan just showed. Our goal is to help you build amazing web applications. Whether you're building apps that integrate and leverage your investment in WebGIS by working with feature layers, imagery, and 3D, or if you are bringing Esri location services into your existing applications, our SDK is a powerful base for you to build your app on. All right, thanks for a great morning. Be back here at 10:40 and to see the second act. Thanks a lot.
Bueno, creo que es el momento que nos tomemos un descanso todos, pero simplemente comentaros, yo con esto último que acaba de decir Jeremy, ¿no? Yo creo que deja mucho entrever muchas de las conversaciones que tenemos el equipo Julie, Jeremy, yo y demás con respecto al rumbo al que está tomando la API de JavaScript, ¿no? Y qué es lo que le hace diferente, especial a las diferentes SDKs que hay por ahí. Yo sigo insistiendo, ¿no? Que al final la API de JavaScript que tenemos nosotros para trabajar con datos geográficos creo que es brutalmente amplia y hemos visto el mogollón de casos de uso distintos, ¿no? Que yo creo que es el foco de la compañía es principalmente eso, seguir ampliando y dar solución a más casos de uso diferentes, 2D, en 3D, es que quedan pocas cosas, ¿no? Que pueda pensar que puedas hacer con otra tecnología que no esté metida en la API de JavaScript. Hay deberes pendientes siempre, seguimos presionando en la parte de a ver cómo podemos mejorar los tiempos iniciales de carga, se pone mucho cariño al rendimiento, pero es verdad que se ve penalizado el tiempo inicial de carga, pero en otros casos de uso, como lo que está enseñando Jeremy, con muchos datos, grandes cantidades de datos y demás, creo que sí se está haciendo un buen trabajillo. Así que nada, con respecto a la API de JavaScript, espero que os haya gustado. Yo sigo teniendo la duda, ¿no? De cada vez veo menos JavaScript y más HTML, ¿no? Lo cual, por un lado, está guay, con las 3 líneas de código poder cargar componentes bastante potentes que ya se entienden con la infraestructura de ArcGIS para pintar y leer los datos. Creo que eso a mucha gente le va a ayudar, especialmente a los que les cuesta un poco más escribir JavaScript. Pero bueno, creo que me gustaría saber si vosotros le veis, qué inconvenientes le veis. Y ya está, la parte de inteligencia artificial generativa me parece que efectivamente el tema asistentes, leer los datos, interpretar los datos, ser capaz de entender cómo visualizar, cómo aplicar los renderizadores, incluso sin saber, porque es verdad que en el ejemplo que hemos visto se mostraba, ¿no? Úsame un dot density. Oye, si no sé cómo se llama eso, ¿no? Yo creo que quiero es pintar algo y que te diga, oye, pues te doy 3 opciones, ¿no? Y que puedas elegir entre 3 opciones, que al final sea como un asistente que te está ayudando a ir pintando, que no sea tan guiado que le tengas que decir tú qué es lo que quieres que te pinte, aunque ya sea una pasada que por detrás te sea capaz de escribir el código y modificar, que me gustaría ver esa aplicación cómo está hecha por detrás. Pero sí, yo creo que hay mucho por descubrir y ya está. Yo una de las dudas que os quería comentar, ¿no? Que siempre me he planteado, ¿no? Veo que la inteligencia artificial generativa se usa mucho, ¿no? Pues para generar imágenes, ¿no? Que no existen, generar vídeos que no existen. Yo creo que en el mundo en el que vivimos nosotros, muchas veces, como el dato es lo más importante y la veracidad del dato es lo más importante, hay mucho recelo a decir, oye, genérame datos geográficos, ¿no? Parece como muy atrevido. Yo he visto ejemplos, ¿no? De imágenes satélites de personas que cogían, eliminaban las nubes, ¿no? Y para que se viese la imagen mejor, o sea, para quitar la nube, o incluso para mejorar la calidad de la imagen, ¿no? Que yo creo que puede tener casos de uso, puede ser muy interesante algunos de casos de uso donde la precisión a lo mejor sea menos relevante que la estética, que no es el caso habitual de un especialista en sistemas de información geográfica, pero sí muchas veces el de un consumidor final que solo necesita visualizar un poquito mejor el mapa y que le da igual si un coche que estaba en la carretera está o no está, ¿no? El quitar y refinar los pequeños detalles. Pero bueno, vamos a dejarlo por aquí, vamos a tomarnos el descansillo todos y eso, nos vemos ahora en un ratito, que creo que son 10, 15 minutos. No me he enterado bien. Déjame... Bueno, si vosotros ya lo sabéis, pues ahora nos vemos. Pero yo creo que sí, que el break es hasta 1:30, entiendo. Suele ser ratito corto. Así que nada, muchas gracias por estar por ahí, muchas gracias por ir comentando y acompañándome en este experimento. Y nada, espero que os esté gustando. Creo que todavía quedan cosas bastante chulas por ver. Así que nada, ahora nos vemos. A ver ahora, que a veces se va el sonido, no sé por qué. Voy a cambiar de nuevo a la otra pantalla. Perdona, que me estoy dando cuenta que tenía que tenía el mute puesto. Para los que estáis todavía por aquí, os quería enseñar un par de cosillas del Dev Summit que desde la distancia, los que no hayáis estado, creo que bueno, puede resultar interesante. Os quiero enseñar dónde está pasando esto ahora mismo. Voy a utilizar Google Maps para enseñaroslo y las teselas 3D. Para que os hagáis una mejor idea, ¿vale? Voy a tener un ojo puesto para que no se me pase el streaming por aquí. Pero bueno, todo esto está pasando en Palm Springs, ¿vale? Palm Springs, como podéis ver, es un desierto que está por aquí en la zona de California. Y si nos acercamos, está en la ciudad de Palm Springs. Y el centro de convenciones es donde está esta estrellita por aquí. ¿Vale? Ahora mismo donde están, pues, no recuerdo cuántas eran, 2000 personas aproximadamente reunidas, es en este complejo que veis por aquí. ¿Vale? Ahora mismo donde estaban hablando en el escenario es en esta parte del edificio. ¿Vale? Aquí es donde se celebra la explanada, donde se monta la fiesta al final del Developer Summit, el jueves por la noche. Y las salas donde se están dando todas las charlas están por esta zona. Por aquí hay un montón de salas, hay un pasillo que tira por aquí, más salas, por aquí hay otro pasillo, más salas. Aquí es donde está el Showcase Area. Ya digo, aquí es donde por la noche el jueves se hace el Dodgeball. Esta es la explanada, esta es la otra entrada que tiene el complejo, que es donde se montan las mesas para hacer el almuerzo. Ahora dentro de un rato allí ellos estarán comiendo y es toda esta zona donde se sale todo el mundo a comer. Y ya os digo, si queréis echarle un vistacillo a cómo es por dentro el Developer Summit, hace unos años escribimos un artículo que era el 15 consejos para sacarle el máximo provecho al Developer Summit. Y en este artículo, donde se dan consejos para los que van para allá y demás, una de las cosas que creamos es, si hacéis clic aquí, abrís este Story Map, que lo hemos actualizado, donde se cuenta cómo se desarrolla el evento. Que yo creo que eso, bueno, pues es algo curioso, porque pasan muchísimas cosas, ¿vale? Aquí podéis ver un plano de ese espacio que estábamos viendo ahí, ¿no? Lo primero que hicimos en Story Map fue contando un poco temporalmente las diferentes actividades que van pasando, ¿no? Empezando por el lunes, que en la sala aquí es donde está la sala, perdón, la explanada donde se come es aquí delante, el Esplanade, ¿vale? Aquí podéis ver el mapa indoor del espacio, donde veis dónde está un apartado para que los partners se reúnan, la Esri Store para comprar cosas, donde la gente se registra, pues eso, las salas que os he dicho, que aquí hay 3 salas, donde se hace el networking el primer día, ¿no? Que a última hora de la tarde, donde hay algo para picotear. Como decía, la zona de registro, ¿no? Y los horarios a los que os se pueden ir a coger las las cosas, las camisetas que se dan todos los años, como esta que tengo yo, que si mal no recuerdo del año pasado. Donde sucede la plenaria, ¿no? Que esto es lo que os estaba diciendo ahora, ¿no? Esos edificios, está el sitio donde se hace la fiesta y aquí es donde tenemos, pues eso, donde está sucediendo ahora mismo, donde hay las 2000 personas aproximadamente metidas, y este es el stage donde están subidos y hablando y presentando. Aquí podéis ver una foto de la explanada que os decía, donde se hace la comida, los horarios. Aquí podéis ver, por ejemplo, este año hay unas 170 charlas técnicas. Como decía, las charlas suelen ser en las salas estas verdes que estáis viendo aquí pintado de verde. Todo esto es donde hay charlas técnicas. Está donde están las charlas de usuarios, por ejemplo. Aquí es donde pasa el speed geeking, que es como un speed dating, donde, bueno, pues se habla de tecnología y la gente va rotando de una mesa a otra, y en cada mesa pues siempre hay una persona con su portátil pues contando algún proyecto o algo, ¿no? Pues bueno, aquí podéis echarle un vistacillo. La Expo Area, ¿no? Que es donde están todos los booths de todos los productos, para que los usuarios se vayan dando un paseíto por allí y pues puedan preguntar las dudas que tengan, conocer. Aquí es donde está la gente del equipo y donde yo estoy todos los años. Yo este año debería estar aquí, pero pedí un permiso especial para no estar porque, pues bueno, porque hice ayer 40 años y quería celebrarlo con la familia y se me solapaban fechas, y encima mi hijo pequeño cumple el viernes y se me solapaban fechas también, y la compañía me ha dado bueno, pues un permiso para quedarme este año en casa, aunque la verdad es que ya os digo que es un evento súper chulo que merece la pena. La verdad, lo que se monta ahí, mira, que podéis ver unas fotos de cuando, mira, estoy yo, aunque eso no se me vea, esos pelos canosos que se ven por ahí, ¿veis? Ahí estoy yo con la mascarilla. Esto es de hace un par de años con Shalomi, que trabaja en Locus Bio, un partner que es de Israel, haciéndonos consultas, ¿no? Y pues, como os digo, la gente se pasa a preguntar cosas, a ver demos. Los code reviews se hacen aquí también. Desarrolladores que quieren sentarse con gente de servicios profesionales para saber cómo mejorar sus desarrollos, temas de problemas de rendimiento, pues también se pueden ver aquí. Estoy mirando que todavía no ha empezado, ¿eh? No os preocupéis. Y eso, aquí, por ejemplo, pues la parte de los demo theaters, que bueno, pues son charlas que se organizan en un espacio un poco más abierto, un poquito más ruidoso, y son charlas más cortitas, ¿vale? Y nada, como decía, están las presentaciones de usuarios, que creo que este año también se hacen en Mesquite B y Mesquite C, la B y la C, perdón, donde presentan proyectos que tienen, y bueno, cosas que han hecho en las que quieren compartir con el resto de la comunidad, que de hecho de ahí salió una cosa de la que se va a hablar ahora, de esa SDK. Ahí estuvimos el año pasado con uno de los clientes hablando de una cosa que hoy se va a presentar. Y bueno, se va a presentar en un evento públicamente así, grabado y retransmitido en directo, pero si habéis seguido el blog habréis escuchado campanas, a lo mejor ya. Pero hoy vais a ver algo más chulo. Y eso, y como os decía, pues las code reviews. De hecho, esta localización este año no es en la parte de Training Services. Ahí me he equivocado y tengo que corregir, porque es en el Oasis. Ah, bueno, sí, es por aquí. Bueno, pues tengo que no estoy muy seguro de esta información. Pero bueno, y eso, el speed geeking, para que hagáis una idea, es esto. Aquí una persona está con un portátil, grupitos de personas se van moviendo de una mesa a otra, y la persona del portátil tiene 5 minutos para hacer un elevator pitch y contar algo interesante a los asistentes. Yo eso, por ejemplo, siempre que voy, siempre estoy contando alguna cosilla. Y nada, uno de los eventos también que está muy chulo es el Meet the Teams, que sucede esta noche allí, que básicamente cuando acaba el día, a última hora, viene un grupo de música que se pone a tocar o sirven comida afuera, y en cada una de estas mesas te puedes encontrar a un equipo. Nosotros, por ejemplo, el equipo de Developer Experience, el año pasado estábamos allí sentados en una mesa, la gente venía, le hablábamos de la página web, de feedback que tuviesen, la gente se presentaba y echábamos un rato muy apañado. Y nada, y aquí podéis, en la parte está del Renaissance, que hay una parte que está muy bien para sentarse si en un momento dado alguien tiene que trabajar o hacer un poco de networking, porque se reúne se quiere reunir con otras personas, pues también es un sitio muy agradable que se puede utilizar durante el evento. Y ya está. Y por último, en este Story Map, si mal no recuerdo, bueno, casi lo último, es las charlas que van a haber mañana con los clientes que vienen a contar proyectos en la misma sala en la que se está haciendo la plenaria hoy, durante 1 hora y media hora cada participante o cada cliente. Y nada, la fiesta, que la verdad es que a mí me parece es súper chulo, es de mis momentos favoritos del Developer Summit, donde la cantidad de opciones para estar con la gente hablando, tomando perritos, jugando a atracciones de estas de feria, lanzando chorraditas, jugando al dodgeball, pues eso, es una pasada, ya veis, con eso muchas veces ponen recreativas, de todo tipo de cosas, bandas de música. A veces la banda de música a mí, con el tema del inglés que está tan fuerte, a veces bueno, pues te tienes que alejar, porque si no, no puedes mantener una conversación con la gente tranquilamente. Pero da mucho juego y ya está. Y el último día, pues ahí está la sesión de cierre, donde están muchos de los principales directores o de los cargos más altos dentro del área de desarrollo de la compañía. Por ejemplo, Yuen, que es el manager de mi manager, ¿no? Que reporta directamente a SAD, y Yuen es el que lleva toda la parte de las SDKs, responsable de todas las SDKs nativas, responsable del equipo de Developer Experience, de los equipos que están desarrollando las nuevas APIs. Y tenemos a Jim McKinney con la parte de Pro, la parte de analítica, parte de apps, ¿no? Parte también de analítica, parte de servidor, CTO de la API de JavaScript y de ArcGIS Online, y bueno, el director que directamente reporta a Jack, y al que, si no estoy confundido, todos los que están a su derecha le reportan a él, ¿no? Así que un evento muy chulo, la verdad es que una pena no poder estar este año allí, pero bueno, creo que el motivo era suficientemente justificable, y espero poder estar el año que viene y que nos podamos encontrar allí, más de uno el año que viene, que podáis estar más personas conmigo allí. ¿Qué más os iba a dejar? Ah, sí, aquí hay un vídeo que es el que he dejado antes a medio poner, que lo podéis encontrar también en Media Space, pero bueno, tampoco... Yo creo que está más pensado para la gente que va a estar hoy allí, y dar una visión transversal de cómo se va a desarrollar el evento. Una cosa que sí os quería decir es, si os interesa y no lo sabíais, las charlas que se dan en el Developer Summit, estamos intentando que todas las presentaciones, demos y demás se vayan subiendo a esta cuenta de GitHub, github.com/Esri Dev Events, ¿vale? Aquí los repositorios que vais a encontrar son solo de charlas, no hay repositorios de otras cosas, no hay sample apps así en plan como en github.com/Esri, ¿vale? Estamos intentando usar un sistema de tagueado y demás para que sea fácil encontrar las charlas de las diferentes conferencias. Junto con esto, comentaros que además del... Y ahora estoy hablando, como estáis viendo, como empleado de Esri, no tanto como miembro de Geo Developer. Os quería contar para que supieseis que hay otra cuenta de Twitter que es Esri Dev Events, donde básicamente cuando hay un hackathon, cuando hay un Developer Summit, cuando hay un live stream, cuando hay cualquier tipo de evento, ponemos o publicamos aquí un poco de información. Si os fijáis, aquí está mi compañera Amy ahora publicando quiénes son las personas que están saliendo a hacer las presentaciones, por si alguien quiere, pues eso, intentar ficharlo en redes sociales, porque le haya gustado de lo que habla, para seguirle, para no perderse nada, ¿vale? Y yo creo que eso era todo lo que os quería contar con respecto a los canales que hay sobre el Developer Summit. No sé si estáis por ahí o no, si estáis descansando. Yo de todas formas, como sé que esto luego se queda grabado, luego pondré los timestamps, para que la gente pueda saltar y ver las diferentes cosas que hemos comentado hoy. Pues nada, lo quería dejar. El experimento para mí está siendo todo un reto, si os soy sincero, porque el tema de que el audio no me entre directamente aquí y tal, que ahora mismo tengo el portátil, donde por un lado estoy controlando el streaming, por otro lado estoy viendo lo que os enseño a vosotros, por otro lado tengo en el móvil la conexión para escuchar lo que se está diciendo en directo, que es lo que estáis escuchando vosotros, pero que yo no lo puedo escuchar igual que vosotros, porque si no me escucharía a mí mismo y me volvería loco. Entonces necesito otro dispositivo más. Y luego tengo el tercer dispositivo que he puesto ahora en el descanso, que es el del iPad, que de hecho estaría guay. Ay, pero es que no puedo. O enseñaría el tinglao que hay aquí montado, pero no puedo porque tengo el móvil funcionando con esto y no quiero que empiece el Developer Summit otra vez y perderme esta parte. Pero bueno, aquí es donde voy a ir controlando que efectivamente me podáis escuchar, que no haya reverberación, que el sonido entre bien del streaming, etcétera, etcétera. ¿Ves? Entonces tengo 3 auriculares, me pongo compruebo que efectivamente se me está oyendo bien, estoy viendo que se ve bien, así que nada. No debe quedar nada de aquí a que vuelva el directo, porque yo pensaba que volvía a la 1:30, pero veo que no, estaba... Se me ha escapado a mí ese detalle. Estoy viendo también que lo que es el live caption de Google Chrome va regular, va con un poco de retraso y a veces se queda encasquillado. Lo siento. Pero, no sé, eso lo tenía que haber preguntado al principio. Pero bueno, mejor tarde que nunca. ¿Estáis pudiendo seguir bien lo que es la presentación? ¿Entendéis bien la parte del inglés? Porque inicialmente mi idea era poner el vídeo, ir haciendo pausas, comentar las cosas que se enseñan y comentarlas con vosotros. ¿Qué es lo que pasa? Que me he dado cuenta de un detalle. Uy, vamos para esto que empieza ya. Volvemos al directo.
All right, all right. What did you guys... What did you guys think of the first half? Pretty good, right? Well, hopefully you had a chance to get some refreshments, stretch your legs. Now, it's very hard for me to see. However, I was told that there's a number of folks sitting at the back, and we do have some seats up here to the front left. Don't be shy. Come on up. Everyone there will welcome you with open arms. So, okay, welcome back. We've got a great part 2 of this day 1. There's still a lot of technology coming your way. And to kick things off, I'd like to hand it over to Anita Kemp, where she's going to talk about the work that the team has been doing with open development. Anita?
Thanks, David. We have great ArcGIS Maps SDKs for both web and native app development. And while we offer our SDKs, we also understand that you may work with another technology or API. Or sometimes you may have an existing solution and you want to integrate ArcGIS services with it. To help you be successful, we ensure that ArcGIS is both open and interoperable. And we do this in many ways. We support open standards such as OGC, W3C, and ISO. We want to incorporate these standards into our technology so that it's easy to interoperate with other systems. We think about the ways in which developers use open source clients to talk with our services. Some of you have chosen to use an open source library, while some of you may have a requirement to use one. So in many instances, we adjust our services, like the base map style service, so that they work well with open source clients. We implement an open architecture so that developers can pull in the capabilities of our services regardless of framework or language. And we implement an open architecture as well as an open API so that you can use our technology with the maximum flexibility within your application. To show us one way we make our APIs developer-friendly, I'm going to pass it over to Courtney.
Thanks, Anita. A few months ago, we introduced a new self-describing endpoint for our base map style service. It provides comprehensive, machine-readable information about the service itself, enabling innovative utilization. You can find this self endpoint within the REST API reference on the developer's website. To make a request to the service, I can use this URL. To do so, I'm going to use Postman, where we have an ArcGIS location services workspace. Within this workspace, I can choose the base map style service collection, and then select the self-describing endpoint example, where the URL has been preloaded for me. This makes it easy to start testing out the service. Once I send the request, a JSON response is returned. It contains information about the different styles with details such as the name, style path, and thumbnail URL. It also contains information about the different language and place options that you can add to a base map. This self-operation allows for the seamless creation of applications. For example, I've built this app using MapLibra GLJS, calcite components, and the base map style service. On the left-hand side, we can see the different options for the base map service parameters. These options have been populated using the self operation. First, I can choose a style among the various ArcGIS and OSM styles. I'll go with ArcGIS navigation. Next, I can select from the set of available languages. Now, base map labels are global by default. Thus, when I select the local language, my labels will update to Greek. Finally, I can select from attributed or all cartographic base map places on my map. Then, with a call to the places service, when I click on a place, I can see its details. Again, these options have been populated using the self-operation call, ensuring that all of these options are up to date. For instance, if a new base map is incorporated into the service, my options will automatically update. Let's see just how straightforward this is to code. I've built this application using calcite components, and my base map options will be auto-populated into those components. Within the JavaScript code, I used the self operation and then returned and used the JSON response to dynamically generate my different base map style choices. Once again, this self call guarantees that any modifications or updates made to the service are immediately reflected within the response. This ensures that your applications remain not only current, but also in alignment with the latest service enhancements. Back to you, Anita.
Thanks, Courtney. That was fantastic. Our REST API
¿Conocíais todo esto? Para añadirlo después.
comply with the Open API specification. This specification defines a standard for describing HTTP APIs so that both humans and machines can understand them. And since a machine can understand an API, it means that we can generate code for a variety of different languages, and you have access to many tools to explore all aspects of an API. So regardless of whether you are a Ruby or PHP or any other type of developer, our services are easily accessible. To demonstrate how you can take advantage of our open APIs, I'm going to pass it back over to Courtney.
Thanks, Anita. Let's explore how these APIs adhere to the Open API specification and discover some of their capabilities. To do this, I'm going to use the Places service. The specification for this service can be found within the REST API reference on the developer's website. When I click on this Open API specification link, I'm provided with information about the service. However, this raw response is a bit challenging to interpret, for me at least. So I'm going to take this Open API specification, and in order to improve my developer experience, I'm going to load it into the Swagger UI Chrome extension. Once I've loaded the specification here, I'm provided with documentation to help me understand how to use the service. Beyond the documentation itself, I'm also provided with a playground or sandbox. Let's explore some of the different endpoints here. I'm going to test out the Places Near Point operation. Within this environment, I've pre-configured several different parameters, including my API key. Once I press execute, an HTTP request is sent, and my nearby place results are returned. Now, let's take this a step further. Imagine, for instance, a Ruby developer would like to use our Places service, but their language of choice is not inherently supported. Fortunately, a code generator exists to help facilitate use of the service. The Open API Generator is a versatile open source tool that allows you to create bindings for services across more than 70 different programming languages and development frameworks. Thus, if we like a client-side or server-side library of your preference, you can generate one independently. Let's look at an example of this in Ruby. I've built this application using the Open API tool, and then I generated the Ruby SDK, which contains the client library. Now, beyond the library itself, it also contains documentation to help me understand how to use the service. Let's observe the simplicity of this code setup. First, I configure my API key, or access token. Then, I initialize the Places API class. Next, I set my query parameters, and then use the nearPointGet method generated by the SDK. To ensure that I retrieve all the results, I iterate through the different pages. And finally, I utilize a template engine to place my nearby place results within a simple HTML file. Once I run the script, my HTML file is created and saved. I can then load this up in the browser to observe my nearby place results. We're excited about this effort of embracing open APIs. As we continue to expand our REST services portfolio, we will ensure that our services comply with the open API specification. Back to you, Anita.
Thanks, Courtney.
Esta demo acaban de presentar es la misma que hice yo en Berlín, pero yo la hice con PHP.
I mentioned earlier that we think about the ways in which developers use open source clients to talk with our services. We want to think about this because Esri is serious about open source. We use it ourselves in our product development. We contribute to it. We created Esri Leaflet to enable tighter integration of location and enterprise services within Leaflet, as well as ArcGIS REST.js, a lightweight JavaScript wrapper that makes it simple to talk with our raw REST services. We participate and collaborate with the open source developer community. Last year, we collaborated with Cesium.js to integrate our services within their library. And most recently, we participated in events such as Hacktoberfest and
Es decir, ahí que estamos explorando todavía ver cómo podemos apoyar más y más, ¿eh?
we support you using it. Whether you simply prefer using an open source library or whether you have a requirement to use one, we make sure that our services are easily accessible. Often, you can access a service directly with its URL endpoint, as I showed earlier with Leaflet and the static basemap tile service. Or you can use ArcGIS REST.js for your server and client-side applications and leverage the full capabilities of services such as places, geocoding, routing, geoenrichment, and spatial analysis. We provide technical support and great documentation, tutorials, and samples on the developer website so that you can get up to speed quickly with our services and build the applications you need. And we continue to evolve our support for these open source libraries. Recently, we added the ability in REST.js to create API keys programmatically to streamline your server workflows. And in Esri Leaflet, we updated the vector basemap layer plugin so that you can access the new features of the basemap style service. So that's it for open development. I'm going to pass it over to Mike, who's going to take us through our Game Engine's SDKs.
All right. Thanks.
Bueno, vamos a pasar a la parte nativa.
Our Game Engine SDKs enable you to bring GIS data into game engines and bring it to life in a range of immersive experiences. These include augmented reality apps, where digital information is overlaid onto the real world around you. Mixed reality apps with virtual tabletops for collaborative planning in your physical or virtual environment. And fully immersive virtual reality apps, where the digital display completely takes over. Immersive apps are a great way for you to experience your GIS, your 3D living digital twin. The world of game engines is continually evolving, and our SDKs are rapidly advancing. The releases over the last year have added many new and enhanced capabilities, including greater support for building information model, or BIM, workflows, and more control over the integration of GIS data and game engine content. But it's not just new features. With each release, brings ever closer integration with the game engine development environments, Unity and Unreal Engine, including a set of intuitive low-code, no-code tools within the Game Engine IDE, new and improved developer code samples, and comprehensive developer guide doc. Let's take a closer look at some of these enhancements. Support for building scene layers enables you to bring BIM data from ArcGIS directly into the game engines and take full advantage of the photorealistic rendering, lifelike animation, and special effects. Well, in the game engine, whether you're using our low-code, no-code tools, scripting, or the API, you get full support for visualizing interacting with all aspects of building scene layers, from the exterior shell to the internal components and subsystems that make up these incredibly rich models. Visual modifications enable you to make on-the-fly changes to terrain, to integrated mesh, to 3D object, and to building scene layers. When you clip, mask, or flatten, you can fill the empty space with other real-world GIS data, with game engine assets, or even with procedurally generated content. Visual modifications make it easier than ever to bring your real-world GIS data into the game engines, to overlay and integrate that data and combine it with game engine assets, actors, and objects. To show us these enhancements in a series of immersive experiences, I'd like to hand over to Adrian and Mason.
¿Cuánto trabajáis con la parte de SDK nativa con los game engines?
Thank you, Mike. Today, we will show you how to build immersive GIS experiences using our game engine SDKs. Here, I have a simple Unity project showing a model of a building recently constructed. Last year, on this stage, we announced the ability to display building scene layers in game engines. But BIM data can be very detailed and hard to make sense of as a whole. So with our latest release, we added the ability to filter that content. To do so in my project, I added a small UI and pre-selected 2 categories that I can turn on and off. That simple project is already ready to be exported onto my phone for our first immersive experience, a real-world augmented reality application. Obviously, I'm not next to this building right now, so I pre-recorded a video. First, I can bring up the menu and use the opacity to make sure that the real world and my virtual building are lining up. Then, turning features on and off gives me the ability to see through walls. I can look at where the inside stairs are, or the AC ducting network, for example. As usual, when mixing virtual elements in your real world, you have to physically hold the device to get a good depth perception. Back to my project, I will now build the next immersive experience. In my IDE, I have access to all the discipline and category of my building scene layers, so I can turn off things like the parking lot. To give context, I'm going to add a base map, elevation, and as I'm getting ready to add an integrating mesh from our partner near map, look closely at the building. You will see that the integrating mesh is covering my building scene layer data. I can use our new mesh modification capability to cut out that mesh. It's a simple option on the layer that allows me to digitize the polygon of the buildings and its surroundings, and then cut through the mesh. Next, I need to flatten the area to not have my base map showing up in the middle of my parking lot. To do so, I can select the polygon I just digitized, copy it, and in my elevation tab, create a new mesh modification. I can paste the polygon and use our new replace functionality that allows me to flatten the area at the desired altitude. I am now ready to add game engine assets into my scene. And here we are. Using our Unity SDK, in just a few clicks, I was able to create a real-looking scene by combining GIS content coming from the ArcGIS platform and game engine assets. Finally, I will cut this scene into a nice circle, though it can be used on a tabletop. I would like to hand it now to Mason that will guide you through this new experience.
Thank you, Adrian, for setting up this awesome app for me. I'll be taking a look at it on the Magic Leap 2, a great device for viewing mixed reality experiences such as this one due to its see-through lenses and pass-through capabilities. Now, I can see the same scene that Adrian has set up on his desktop, but as a virtual table positioned in my physical space. Nice. I can move the table around and position it higher or lower in front of me, as well as I can zoom in and out and pan by interacting with the data. Mixed reality is great for a multitude of reasons, one of which being that it is ideal for users to get a better understanding of 3D landscape or digital twin. Speaking of digital twin, if I zoom in a bit closer here, we can see Mike, who's represented by Mapman, enjoying the same scene, but from a much more immersive perspective. I can see his current location as well as what he's looking at, but let's ask, what do you think, Mike?
Well, Mason, I think it's amazing. I really feel like I'm bringing my life to this scene in this fully immersive virtual reality or VR experience. I'm standing outside the building in the scene that Adrian created for us, with scene layers and feature data from ArcGIS, combined with game engine assets to enhance the environment with foliage, street furniture, vehicles, and more. One of the benefits of VR is the ability to instantly teleport to another location. So let's head inside. Now I'm actually standing inside my building scene layer, where you can appreciate the incredible level of interior detail. I'm wearing an HTC Vive XR Elite headset. What you're seeing is the view through one of the lenses, so unfortunately you can't appreciate this quite like I do. But the stereoscopic vision, depth perception, and head tracking give me a complete sense of presence in this scene. Realistic lighting, materials, and game engine assets all help add to the sense of immersion. But now it's time to really bring this scene to life. Virtual reality is incredibly valuable for simulation and training, especially for hazardous or dangerous situations, like the smoke pouring from our air conditioning duct. The use of VR for training improves retention of information, helps minimize mistakes, all of which is critical when every second counts. And with simulated pedestrian flow, we can see how people in the building may respond to the incident, how we can best help them at the time, and even how the building design may impact their behavior. Now I'd like to hand you back to Mason, who's going to show us another perspective onto our simulation.
Curioso. No son los gráficos más alucinantes que he visto en una demo, pero igual me gustaría escuchar vuestra opinión.
Thank you, Mike. This mixed reality scene that Adrian has set up for me is the perfect environment to plan emergency responses by visualizing and understanding how they might play out in real time. Using my virtual table, I can gain a complete overview of the simulation and collaborate with colleagues and other agencies. Mixed reality helps us to plan a coordinated and efficient response by modeling how people may be leaving the building in order to ensure that they do not block the path of arriving emergency vehicles, determine where to place emergency responders to ensure that anyone who may need medical attention can gain it in a timely manner, as well as identify which services need to be shut off and protected. I'd now like to hand it back to Mike, who will give us a look at what these emergency responders may be experiencing on the ground.
Thanks, Mason. In our final perspective onto this simulation, we're seeing Adrian back out in the field, showing us how emergency first responders can use augmented reality to see how the situation may unfold on the ground. They can see emergency vehicles arriving on site and identify any real-world access issues. Using AR, they can see inside the building and understand the internal building structure and subsystems, such as the air conditioning ducts. With AR, you truly can see what others can't. Well, that was a great series of demos. Thank you, Adrian and Mason.
Tengo yo ahí mi gap de conocimiento en la parte de realidad aumentada.
That was a lot of technology that we just saw. So let's quickly recap what we saw. You saw Adrian as a developer using our Maps SDK for Unity, combining real-world GIS data with game engine assets to build a believable scene for our simulation. You then saw Adrian take that single game engine project and build multiple dynamic, immersive GIS experiences, each with a crucial role to play. We saw Adrian using AR.
Yo creo que la parte... Me voy a bajar un poco el volumen aquí porque creo que está haciendo simplemente una recapitulación. Yo creo que la parte de Game Engines igual tiene un futuro todavía muy interesante. No sé cuántos, tengo la inquietud de saber cuántos lo veis a corto o medio plazo en vuestro trabajo. Yo creo que la parte de defensa a lo mejor es donde tiene a día de hoy un poco más acogida, entiendo. Pero eso, veo el potencial al mismo tiempo que la supuesta, ¿no? O como entiendo, la barrera de entrada al haber menos desarrolladores capacitados, ¿no? Con esa capacidad de hacer cosas con engines. La parte de low code la verdad es que no la ha tocado, pero sí. Pero eso me genera un poquito de inquietud. Vamos a subirle a ver.
Tell us about our Maps SDKs for building native apps.
Venga. Y va a venir una de las novedades.
Thanks, Mike. That was awesome. We all love native apps because they're easy to use and provide a great experience. With information literally at our fingertips, we can stay productive no matter if we're in the office or out in the field. Native apps are built for offline with many on-device capabilities, so the work doesn't have to stop when the network connection does. And with full access to all the device sensors, location is at the heart of the user experience. Now, we build many native apps at Esri, and using our native SDKs, you too can easily build high-performance native mapping applications. Be it a phone, a tablet, or a computer, you can put the right map in the right app on the right device. All of our native SDKs share a strong common foundation that's optimized to run across a range of devices.
Como he dicho antes del núcleo C++.
And they provide a modern developer experience using the latest frameworks, tools, and language features. With SDKs for .NET, Java, Qt, Swift, and Kotlin, you can pick your favorite development stack and quickly get going. Among the many types of apps you can build for the field, our SDKs provide a great foundation for data collection. With flexible patterns for working offline, you can start your projects in the office and transfer them to a device, or download them directly over the network onto the device and synchronize changes as you go. Thanks to a compact and a fully featured geodatabase on device, your apps have seamless access.
Esta parte sí que me interesa, sobre todo saber cuántos sois nuevos, porque es verdad que en esta parte está haciendo simplemente un repaso a muchas de las cosas que bueno, pues siempre han sido así, ¿no? Los casos de uso que justifican mayormente, ¿no? Utilizar una SDK nativa versus la versión web, ¿no? Entonces, bueno, para mí hasta ahora mismo esto no es nada nuevo, no sé para vosotros.
You'll get an open source toolkit component that provides a great editing experience out of the box that you can customize for your data collection workflows. And to see an example of this, I will pass it to Rama.
Thanks, Devesh.
Aquí sí van a hablar de algunas de las últimas mejoras que se han introducido en la serie.
Smart forms provide a streamlined data collection experience by adjusting dynamically based on the user inputs. Let's see how we are bringing this experience to all the developers of the native applications. Here, I have an application built with Kotlin SDK, and I have a map with wind turbine data around the Palm Springs area. And I, as a wind turbine maintenance technician, is going to perform an inspection. I'll start by opening a form. And the form already has a few form elements, the technician name and inspection time, logically grouped and populated based on the logged-in user credentials. Next, the form prompts me to scan nearest turbine in order to gather some information about it. I'll use the device's NFC sensor to scan the turbine. As soon as the sensor information is received, the turbine ID as well as other fields are automatically populated. Now, I need to choose what I'm inspecting, and I have a list of options to choose from, and I'll be inspecting the rotor blades and gearbox. As soon as I make the choice, the form prompts me to enter the current power output in order to determine the turbine's efficiency. So I'll enter the value based on the information available at the turbine, and we can observe that the turbine efficiency is dynamically computed based on my input as well as other historic performance data. And if the turbine efficiency is less than 50%, I further need to inspect the components. I'll continue to check the gearbox lubrication, so I'll choose yes, and I need to check the oil temperature as well as the oil fill volume. As I enter the values, if I incorrectly enter the wrong value, the form validates it and corrects me.
Todas restricciones en el modelo de datos, no tanto
And
la
finally, the
aplicación.
form checks if there are any visual defects observed on the rotor blades. I did observe some, so I'm going to choose yes, and attach some pictures to show the visible damage. Once I collected all the necessary information, I'll finish the inspection by submitting the form, and the form is successfully submitted for further evaluation. What I've shown you is the power and flexibility you have when working with native applications by simplifying the user experience while maintaining the data integrity. Next, I'll show you the code to see how easy it is to integrate the smart forms into the application. This application uses Jetpack Compose, a declarative UI framework for modern Android development. And to integrate the form into the application, I create a compose state variable using the feature form object from the SDK and pass it as a parameter to my feature form composable function, which is inside my site sheet. Now, in order to hydrate the form, on a click of a button, I create a new instance of feature form and assign it to my compose state variable. And the feature form takes in a feature and a feature form definition, which can be obtained from its layer that is authored on the web. And I make sure my site sheet is visible. And that's all I need to integrate the smart form into the application. Thank you, and back to you, Divesh.
Sí, la verdad es que se hace una inversión importante a la hora de actualizarlo al último framework que soporta cada tecnología. Eso sí que me consta.
Integrate device sensors like the NFC reader right into the user experience. In today's dynamic world, users need timely access to the latest information so that they can carry out their work effectively and make good decisions. Native apps are the perfect companion, running quietly in the background, even when our device is locked and in our pocket. With GeoTriggers, apps can monitor change in device location and alert the user if they enter or leave a geofence. Apps can also consume data in real time from stream services. Using dynamic entities, developers get an interactive and responsive view of that data that you can use easily to drive updates in your app as the information streams in. We recently added support for custom feeds. So now, with just a few lines of code, you can integrate your own data formats and get all the power of dynamic entities. Not only can you consume data coming from services, you can also integrate peer-to-peer feed with data coming over a mesh network, like one that's powered by this portable Gotenna radio transmitter. To see an example, I'll pass it to Jen.
Thanks, Divesh. We recently added dynamic entities to the native Maps SDKs, a powerful API for dealing with streaming data. In the last release, we added support for custom feeds, enabling you to bring in your own custom data to take full advantage of the dynamic entities' capabilities. And the application on screen is an example of custom feeds in action. Here, we have GeoMessage XML datagrams delivered over a UDP peer-to-peer feed. Let's take a look at the code behind this app. First, we create a map, and we're going to add a single layer to it. a dynamic entity layer. First, we create a dynamic entity data source info. And this defines a schema of all the fields we expect to see for each new observation. We then create a custom data source using that info object and a custom feed. And finally, we use the custom data source to create our dynamic entity layer and add it to the map's operational layers. And the SDK then takes care of everything else, such as updating the map display. And if we take a closer look at the feed itself, we'll see that it's a list of events. And in this case, we're using Swift to emit observation events, where each new observation is made up of a geometry and a set of attributes. And the SDK parses the attributes, works out which feature the observation belongs to, and adds it to the sequence of observations. If I hop back to the running app, we can see how the SDK can be used to customize things, such as adding labels, adding tracks to view historical observations, and updating the symbology to something appropriate for the data's context. In this case, we apply a dictionary renderer of military symbology. We've shown how you can now bring in your own custom data sources and use with our Dynamic Entities API within your real-time applications. Back to you, Devesh.
Con la gracia de que te permite conectarte a cualquier fuente de datos, porque es de ArcGIS.
Thanks, Jen.
Mola.
That was a great example of how you can use custom real-time feeds to improve collaboration and awareness in the field. Dynamic entities and smart forms are just some of the many things we're doing to make it easy for you to build great native apps.
Hi, Hazur.
But there's one more thing I want to talk about today. We know the developer landscape keeps evolving. And like David mentioned earlier in the day, we want our SDKs to support you in using the best innovations. So with that, I'm very excited to announce that we'll soon be releasing a new Maps SDK for Flutter. Flutter is rapidly growing in popularity for cross-platform mobile development. It's got a strong developer community, and it's packed with productivity features you love. It's based on Dart, which is a modern programming language, and it offers a range of cross-platform widgets to jumpstart your projects. It's got a first-class tooling environment where you can seamlessly build and iterate on your app designs. And to show us our first look at this new SDK, I'll pass it back to Jen.
Thanks, Devesh. I'm really excited to share with you today a preview of the upcoming beta release of the ArcGIS Maps SDK for Flutter. Flutter is a UI framework for building natively compiled cross-platform applications, and it's grown rapidly in popularity due to its extensive tooling, flourishing open source community, and rapid development cycle. And the best way to show you how productive the development experience can be is to show you. On the right-hand side of the screen, a mapping application is running in both iOS and Android emulators. And we can pan, zoom, and rotate the map using all the usual gestures. On the left side of the screen, the source code for the app is running in VS Code. And we have the usual workflows of adding a dependency on ArcGIS Maps and setting an API key. Let's dive into the source code for the app and make some updates to the UI. And there are two key Flutter concepts I want to share with you whilst we do this. And the first concept is that everything in Flutter is a widget. Widgets are the building blocks for user interfaces and define both the layout and the interactive elements. In the running apps, we have a map view and 3 buttons in a column. In the code, we have our widget tree, which contains a stack widget wrapping our ArcGIS Map View widget. And this has been configured with a controller, an ArcGIS map and base map style, and an initial viewpoint. On top of that, we have a container holding our overlay controls, which is a helper method wrapping our column widget containing our 3 icon button widgets. So let's rearrange this UI slightly and move the 3 buttons to the bottom center of the screen. So I'm going to select the 3 buttons, refactor, and wrap with a row. And when I hit save, you'll notice the applications update. And this introduces the second key concept, hot reload. Hot reload allows code changes to be reflected immediately in the running apps, as we just saw, without having to wait for recompile or redeploy steps. The Flutter framework is written in Dart, a concise and modern programming language which provides a just-in-time compiler within its VM, and it's this that enables the stateful hot reloading. So, back to prototyping my app. We can now adjust some properties on the column and row to reposition them. First, we'll move the column to the bottom, and then we'll reposition the row in the center. Great. And finally, we can make use of padding widgets to add some spacing between the buttons and tidy things up. Great. Now we can verify the actions of the buttons, such as resetting the viewpoint rotation back to north, zooming to our current location, and with the third button, we can solve and display a route on the map. And if we dive into this solve route method that button is called, we'll see API that will be familiar to users of the Maps SDKs, such as the definition of a route task and route parameters, whilst taking advantage of modern Dart language features, such as async await and null safety. In this case, we aim to use and preserve our last known location as a starting point on the route, and then find the best sequence between the remaining stops. We then solve the route and display the result on the map in a graphics overlay. I've demonstrated how you can combine the capabilities of ArcGIS with the productivity of Flutter as a development tool for building cross-platform mobile applications.
Bueno, ¿qué os parece? Yo he estado peleando por esto después de escuchar a muchos desarrolladores y al final lo hemos conseguido. Estoy súper emocionado.
Thanks, Jen. That was a look at the upcoming Flutter SDK. It'll be available in beta next month and provides another great option for cross-platform mobile development. We can't wait to see what you'll build with it. And with that, I'll hand it back to David.
All right. Devesh, that was amazing. Okay, how do we sum up that morning? I'm going to try very, very briefly. Sud gave us a great overview of our technology and our strategy, and then Jeremy led a session on our JavaScript SDKs. Anita, I thought, and the team did a great job with all the work we've been doing around open development. And then I really love that game engine demonstration. So Mike, Adrian, Mason, and the team did a great job there. And then Devesh, Jen, and Rama bringing us to this point with the native SDK technology. A lot of excitement. But this is just the beginning. So after lunch, there are sessions. We've got the plenary here tomorrow morning. And, of course, the keynotes on Thursday. But first, I'm sure many of you are hungry. And for those of you that don't know, we'll be serving lunch right now. It's straight ahead in front of me in the Esplanade outside of registration. Thank you so much for joining us today, and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.
Bueno. Pues nada, con esto se acaba el primer día de la plenaria. Gracias a los que habéis aguantado hasta el final. Sé que ha sido intenso y que al final a mí me pasa muchas veces. Yo entiendo que cada uno trabaja en las tecnologías en las que trabaja y, por ejemplo, a mí siempre me ha pasado que la última parte se me hacía más pesada porque yo soy desarrollador web, ¿no? Entiendo que cuando uno no domina una tecnología, no con la que trabaja en el día a día, pues tampoco te parece tan interesante, ¿no? Esa última parte de la plenaria. Puede, vaya, o al revés. O si eres de nativo, la parte web a lo mejor te choca, ¿no? Nada, yo simplemente quería comentar un par de cosas que me iba apuntando por aquí. Creo que la parte de los game engines, como decía, a mí la parte de la realidad virtual me parece... Perdón, realidad aumentada me parece súper interesante. Creo que todavía estamos en una fase muy temprana en la parte de conectar los GIS con la realidad aumentada, pero me gustaría escuchar si alguno había hecho alguna vez algo, si hay algún tema que os interese igual. Siempre estoy buscando qué son las cosas que más os interesan para intentar traer a alguien que nos pueda contar un poco más y investigar un poco más. Me ha llamado bastante la atención que lo de las 3D tiles simplemente se hayan comentado así por encima, pero no se haya hecho ninguna demostración. Yo creo que eso va a traer cola. Pero bueno, también me gustaría saber qué opináis. No sé si visteis en LinkedIn lo que compartí de un vídeo de una simulación de una inundación en Brisbane, Australia, pero creo que también eso fue una pasada, la verdad. Y era básicamente combinando la API de JavaScript de Esri con las teselas de Google. Y la potencia de los dos juntos me parecía, los datos de Google y la SDK de JavaScript, podían hacer cosas que a mí, sinceramente, a simple vista, como decía John Foster, mi manager, parecía un game engine, ¿no? Parecía que estaba hecho con Unreal, con Unity. Con respecto a la parte de... Yo esa es una parte que sí que yo sigo insistiendo mucho, pero todavía no he conseguido que cale hasta el punto que me gustaría. Cuando se habla de Open Development, a mí me gusta hablar de la Open Vision. Creo que es justo y necesario, entre otras cosas por desconocida por mucha gente, porque creo que a veces no se entiende, no se cuenta totalmente la historia, y a esta página estamos en proceso de refinarla y de hacer algunas mejoras. Déjame que lo voy a poner, a ver si lo puedo poner un poquito más grande. Aquí estamos. Yepa. Toma ya. Y esto tiene que ir para atrás, que se me solapa. Toma ya. Ahí. Pues en esta página básicamente se habla de la Esri Open Vision, que es algo en lo que yo estoy, pues eso, creo que es algo muy acertado y debe ser muy importante, y el pilar central que debe ayudarnos como compañía Esri a lo que se dice en inglés, North Star, ¿no? Debe ser nuestra estrella polar que nos ayude a saber cuál es el rumbo que debemos seguir como compañía, para hacer los productos y todas las tecnologías más interoperables, perdón. Desde, como se ha contado, hacer las APIs REST conforme a estándares que antiguamente, las primeras que se crearon y las más populares a día de hoy, no se crearon siguiendo estándares porque no existían, pero que a día de hoy podemos y estamos trabajando, como habéis visto, en la parte de Places API, que es la nueva API, para que sea conforme a esa especificación y poder disfrutar de todos los beneficios que tiene el poder tener una API Open API, como poder generar, como ha hecho Courtney, un wrapper, ¿no? Una utility library para poder trabajar directamente con los endpoints, ¿no? Fácilmente en cualquier lenguaje, utilizando proyectos open source, o no sé si lo hay, no open source, pero bueno, proyectos que te generan las librerías automáticamente. Con la parte de base maps habéis visto, por ejemplo, cómo hemos hecho y hemos documentado con el endpoint ese de self todos los estilos de mapa que están disponibles a través de la API, dar las miniaturas para que cualquier producto, ya sea de Esri o no sea de Esri, como hemos visto con un ejemplo de una librería open source, poder crear una aplicación que dinámicamente configure su interfaz y te muestre toda la potencia del servicio sin tener que ir a la documentación y actualizar a mano cuando hay un cambio. Y si vais aquí, pues está también la parte de lo que hablamos, la parte de tanto a nivel de cliente como servidor. También se habla aquí de la parte de estándares y especificaciones, ¿no? Ser más transparente, seguir abriendo cada vez más especificaciones, que muchas veces por falta de recursos, más que por otra cosa, por las que no están documentados, abiertos públicamente en la página web. La parte de servidor, tanto como la parte de cliente, cumplir los estándares, tanto que sirvamos los estándares OGC bien como que los consumamos bien en los clientes. La línea en la que Satish y personas como el equipo de Developer Experience y yo en concreto es uno de mis mayores motivaciones a poder conseguir. La parte de Open Data, que es otra parte de lo que entendemos nosotros por una plataforma abierta, ¿no? Es animar a que las organizaciones cada vez abran más datos. Desde ese lado, no sé si habéis escuchado lo que estamos haciendo con Overture Maps, junto a un mogollón de empresas, Meta, Microsoft, a Amazon, para conseguir que los datos abiertos sean cada vez más útiles y mejores, y que haya más, y que podamos colaborar con la comunidad OpenStreetMap para que le facilitemos más datos para que esos datos terminen estando en esa base de datos tan estupenda de la que cualquiera podemos disfrutar. Y bueno, para mí es un tema súper importante. Creo que no da tiempo por lo reducido y lo que se condensa todo a contar lo que se merece esta parte dentro de las conferencias, y particularmente en la plenaria, que es cuando más gente hay. Espero que haya gustado. Creo que había cosas muy interesantes. El servicio de teselas estáticas, yo creo que, bueno, es algo que a lo mejor no parece inicialmente muy disruptivo, pero creo que es una forma inteligente, muy potente de empezar o de retomar esa capacidad que había de cargar esos mapas rápido de una manera más eficaz. Creo que los web components de la API de JavaScript van a dar, les queda mucho todavía para seguir creciendo y mejorando, pero he estado en varias sesiones de Julie y el roadmap que tienen, ¿no? La hoja de ruta que tienen es muy interesante a la hora de ir creando componentes cada vez más complejos y que se puedan reutilizar de manera bastante sencilla. Y está el reto, yo creo, de bueno, mantener al día una documentación muy buena para poder acceder y poder personalizar todos esos componentes, pero al mismo tiempo entrar a ese equilibrio, ¿no? con el poder hacer cosas rápidas y que sea intuitivo. El servicio de elevación igual no parece algo súper disruptivo, porque dice, bueno, un servicio de elevación, ya teníamos elevaciones, pero vosotros pensáis que muchas de estas cosas son el primer paso para poder construir APIs mejores y más complejas de cara a un futuro, ¿vale? Tened en cuenta que este tipo de cosas se hacen para hacer más accesible a los desarrolladores de todo tipo, tanto para los que trabajáis en organizaciones de clientes, partners, gente que trabaja dentro de Esri y gente que no tiene necesidad de un GIS a día de hoy, pero quiere datos de elevación, poder acceder a estos datos al servicio más potente de elevación posible, porque si de algo yo creo que podemos presumir en muchos aspectos en Esri es de tener, o estar orgulloso, a lo mejor no tengo que presumir, es de tener una base de datos buenísima y una calidad muy buena gracias a los partners que nos rodean, gracias a los clientes que nos rodean. Y creo que el que podamos abrir eso de una manera amigable al resto del mundo es algo que yo creo que tiene, pues, que no tiene precio. Y muy interesante, espero que bueno, ya habéis comentado en el chat, ¿no? Que la parte de la inteligencia artificial generativa a modo de asistente, yo creo que todos lo vemos mucho recorrido. Ya os he dejado ese chatbot que yo hice a modo experimental, por si me quisierais dar en algún momento un poco de feedback de qué os parece, para ayudaros en el desarrollo y con las consultas que tengáis de desarrollo en la página de developerarcgis.com. Es una de las propuestas con las que yo he experimentado, he jugado y bueno, estoy a ver si consigo que me deis feedback para empujar un poco más internamente al equipo a que explore seriamente esa opción. Y nada, no me enrollo más, que nada, ha sido un placer, ha sido todo una experiencia y un reto hacer este streaming. El año que viene prácticamente seguro no lo podré hacer porque estaré en Estados Unidos, estaré ahí en la sala donde estaba todo el mundo. Espero que con más de uno de los que habéis conectado hoy aquí. Y lo dicho, que gracias, que nos vemos en el próximo evento, que recordad que tenemos el próximo evento Geo Developers hablando sobre GeoServer con Nacho Ponsoda. donde nos va a hacer una charla cortita, eran 30 minutos si mal no recuerdo, donde nos va a explicar cómo usando la interfaz gráfica de usuario, como usando la API de GeoServer, cómo se pueden publicar mapas. ¿Vale? Entonces nada, os animo a que os apuntéis, os invito a que presentéis vuestras propias charlas y lo dicho, que tengáis buena tarde, noche, dependiendo en qué franja horaria estéis, que un abracito y que nos vemos en la próxima. Venga, hasta luego.